December 7, 1941. A day that shall live in infamy. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Pearl Harbor. Welcome to the Spy-Fi guys, where we cover spy facts, spy fiction, and everything in between. I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
And today we are covering another movie about Pearl Harbor, following last week's Tora Tora Tora. This week we are covering Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor from 2001. And to cover that movie, I figured we should have someone who is currently living in Hawaii, as opposed to me who used to live in Hawaii. Let's have a warm aloha to Sarah, returning guest.
Aloha. Thank you.
Welcome back, Sarah. Glad to see everything's going well in Hawaii.
Of course. It is paradise.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, today we are covering Pearl Harbor. It's famous for being terrible, but as I think we will discuss, it's not that bad,
and
in my opinion.
Also commemorate this recording, I'm wearing an Aloha shirt because, of course, I had to.
I will confess that I had not seen this movie before. Before just now. I have many feelings. I have many notes. It was a roller coaster of emotion. I thought
Sounds about right.
Thought I hated it. Thought I loved it. I have thoughts about. I could talk conservatively for 6 hours. I think about this movie.
Ooh, wow!
Since you could talk for so much about it, maybe we should get started here.
All right, Zach, can you give us the plot synopsis from IMDb?
Yeah, listen to this. A tale of war and romance mixed in with history. The story follows two lifelong friends and a beautiful nurse who are caught up in the horror of an infamous Sunday morning in 1941.
Okay. So first of all, there is no based on a true story or anything like that in the beginning of this movie.
That's correct, because it is not based on a true story.
It's based on a true event.
As I think will show up many times, this is designed to be an answer to Titanic. It's very similar to Titanic.
It is. It's Michael Bay's Titanic.
But Titanic did not claim to be based on a true story, which makes sense.
Fair enough, yeah.
I admittedly have not seen Titanic either.
What? I haven't seen it either.
Hold up. What?
I know.
Okay, Zach, that's excusable, but as a girl of our generation, how did you not see Titanic?
The honest answer is that I thought it was...
Principle?
Well, I thought it was too racy for me, so I self-selected out of it. I thought that it was I thought it was too sexy, so it was rated R. I don't know how old I was, 13 or something. I guess I was a little bit of a prude.
I respect that point of view.
7, yeah. You were
I was less than 13 then, or younger than 13. I was little. So I decided it was inappropriate for me. I was allowed to watch pretty much whatever I wanted. So it was purely self-selection.
Pearl Harbor is much more tame. There's no nudity.
Oh, yeah, yes, it is PG-13. Let's get into this movie. So it starts off not in Hawaii, but in sub-Midwestern state. I don't think do we actually get a place where?
Yeah, it's in Tennessee and it's 1923.
Okay, that's not the Midwest. It looked like a Midwestern state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. So we opened on a plane, and again, it's going to be very obvious from that tippity top that I had not seen this movie before. So we opened on a plane, and I thought, oh my God, we're starting already?
1913?
Well, I didn't see the year or the place.
All right.
I just thought, it's a plane.
Come on, you guys pay attention. It was Tennessee 1923.
Oh, 23, sorry.
It's post-World War I because the dad refers to fighting in World War I.
Yeah.
So we have a crop duster, pan over these two kids playing on what looks like, how do they build this thing? It's a makeshift airplane, but they have bicycle parts built into it so that when you turn the bicycle pedals, spins the propeller, and they have I like the thing, they had little cards stuck inside the spokes of the bike so that when you turn the spokes, it makes that click sound like a propeller going.
That's cool.
I like that. It was a nice touch of things that, I was an inventive kid who made stuff out of other stuff. So when I see that sort of stuff, it touches my heart.
Yeah, so immediately we're like, these guys love flying. That's the only thing they care about, even as kids.
And I love there's the little scene where they're pretending to be on the guns, and then one shouts, "Land of the free, home of the brave." It's like, oh my gosh. I want to get this out there too. This movie was made pre 9/11 and released pre 9/11, but
That's
you can't tell because it's so permeated with that post 9/11 patrioticness that we all had, that was all out there, that you kind of feel like it had to have been a post 9/11 movie.
That's also something a lot of critics don't like about it. Like some
Mhm.
of the YouTube people that I went to use for Spy Fact versus Fiction complained about the flag waving patriotism. But compared to movies that came later, I didn't think it actually had that much.
I think if it had been released post 9/11, I think it might have gotten a bigger impact. Not that this had like a small impact. It had a budget of like 140 and made 450 million, so it made its money.
I loved all the cheesy elements of this movie.
Yeah, right.
Anything cheesy, I was super down for. The over the top patriotism that just like got you vamped up and ready to go. The bromance between
Serious bromance.
Yeah, I'm such a sucker. I'm such a sucker for that. Yeah.
I guess this was the perfect choice for Sarah then. I didn't even realize that.
So we have Rafe and Danny, and Rafe is...
Why is he named Rafe?
It's a name,
It
apparently.
boggles the mind.
I feel like it is... I don't know. Maybe like a screenwriter's grandfather was named Rafe or something.
It's definitely a distinctive name that you would remember.
So I, several times throughout the movie, forgot who was who. So I think of them as Ben Affleck and what's his face?
He forgot his name.
I forgot already.
Josh Hartnett.
Josh Hartnett.
Josh Hartnett.
And
Yes.
I thought Josh Hartnett was the other Josh, the one who's Thanos.
Oh,
Josh Brolin.
yeah.
And I was like, boy, he sure looks different when he was younger, but it was a different Josh, as it turns out.
Yeah, and he's much older. Josh Brolin is.
Right.
The thing that we need to learn here, well, first we get hints of here, is that Rafe seems to be dyslexic because he misspelled rudder on, like, they have a little chalkboard on it and he spelled it wrong. Once his dad finishes dusting the crops, they sneak into the crop duster and play with all the dials and then accidentally start the plane.
Here's my hot take. Children should not fly airplanes.
That's not that hot of a take.
I mean, it's very clear they didn't intend to actually take it off.
I mean, I think the only exception would be one Anakin Skywalker, who can clearly fly a plane well.
Mm-hmm.
But should he, though?
So,
I think it was R2 doing most of the flying.
So they, accidentally end up flying a few inches off the ground. Danny's dad comes and is like, scolding Danny and is taking him away and also makes mention of this, you don't spend any time with this no account boy who can't read. So again, something's up with Rafe. When Danny's getting taken away, Rafe grabs the rudder off of their makeshift plane and hits Danny's dad over the back and calls him a no good German, because of course there's still the anti-German sentiment from World War One.
Yeah, you can ask that professor who wrote Traitors or Patriots about that. A lot of the dialogue in this movie is really bad, but there are a couple scenes that feel very real. Unfortunately, they tend to be pretty negative scenes, and this is one of them. I really quite like this part. I recognize the actor, but I couldn't remember his name. The guy who plays the dad.
William
He looks
Fichtner.
really familiar. There you go. He's a perennial that guy.
He's in
that
everything.
Guy,
thing. He's in the opening of The Dark Knight. He's the banker.
Right. He gets hit and he doesn't hit back. He just stands up and is like, has a
Shell-shocked.
World War I PTSD flashback and then walks away.
Danny, thanks Ray for sticking up for him, but goes back to his dad.
I mean, ultimately, yeah, of course.
And then we cut to our first of many newsreels about the war on the front.
So I guess they jump forward like 15 years or whatever.
And next we meet grown-up Danny and Rafe, who are flying P-40s, playing a game of chicken.
As it was coming back and forth between Josh Hartnett and Ben Affleck, it took a couple of flashes back to Ben Affleck, despite the fact that I knew that he was in this movie. I knew he was basically the star of the movie, and yet it did take a second.
You're used to seeing him as old Batman.
I guess so. I don't know. I blame the camera angles and the lighting.
Or the fact that this movie is 20 years old. Think about that.
Yeah, that could
That's
be part
weird.
of it. Yeah.
Sounds
But
about
yeah.
right.
Anyway, so we see them, and they're really good pilots. They play chicken, and then they both turn the same way to narrowly avoid hitting each other. And of course, this gets them called into their superior officer's office, who is one.
He's Jimmy Doolittle.
Jimmy, I couldn't remember. Jimmy Doolittle, played by Alec Baldwin. Excuse me.
Alec Guinness. Wow.
I had Star Wars on the brain because we were talking about Anakin Skywalker briefly.
I don't remember them identifying him as Jimmy Doolittle at this point. Also, I had an observation that the guy with the sunglasses who's watching them play chicken, I thought was Casper Van Dien, but it turns out it was not him. Doolittle is chewing them out, and
this is like straight out of Top Gun, doing flybys and all that, getting chewed out after that.
Yeah, I can see why Christian likes this movie now. It's interesting that Rafe responds by basically like kissing his butt a little bit.
The French have a word for it. They call it an homage, sir.
It was just okay. This movie is pretty good at drama. It needs to stop trying to do comedy. The comedy is almost never funny.
I like this line. It's like, that's bullshit. Bullshit, Macaulay. But it's very good bullshit.
Glad you brought that up because this is the first time that the subtitles are a little bit censored.
Oh, yeah, right?
The subtitles! The closed captions were censored. Right. Yeah.
To be fair, I was okay with it when they had all the Japanese slurs in there. They cut those out, but the swear words, they didn't need to censor that.
It's just funny. It's like watching a TV edit, except without the bad ADR over there.
Or the TV edit captions, but the real audio.
Right. So basically, he says that's a load of baloney.
Yeah.
On the subtitles.
Yeah.
That's the one example.
It took me because that was the first time that there was a disconnect, and obviously I had them on, and it took me a minute to realize what was happening. All right, that's the second time I've said it's taken me a minute to realize something fairly obvious.
Yeah, your brain is not fully engaged with the movie yet.
Hopefully I will redeem myself as the podcast goes on.
Anyway, so we also hear that Rafe has been accepted into something called Eagle Squadron, which is a outfit that the British RAF or Royal Air Force have set up so that American pilots can go over and fight in the war.
So basically, he's like, if I don't go and fight in this war, I might age out.
What did he say? I'm almost 30.
He said, I'm going to be 25. I'm going to be an old man. And I wrote that down because that is such a 25-year-old thing to say. That I'm going to be an old man. I'm 25.
He was 29 at the time of this filming, if I recall. So he's playing younger than he actually was.
Which is fairly normal. Actually, I don't think his concern was so unwarranted because soldiers and sailors and airmen are often much
pilots,
in real life than they are in the movies. Like a lot of them were not even old enough to buy a beer in World War II.
Especially in World War II, yeah. So next we go over to a bunch of nurses on a train. The main one is Evelyn, played by Kate Beckinsale. And she's telling the story of how she met this guy. So here's my question. These are Navy nurses, right?
Yes.
But all the guys are Army pilots. Did the Army not have nurses? Like, why would Navy nurses be administering shots for Army pilots?
I don't know. It may have been a mistake. But I wanted to talk about the nurses because Sarah is our local, what's the word I'm looking for? Our local peddler of feminist propaganda, as she would admit herself. So I'm curious to hear her thoughts on these nurses, because it seems like the only thing they do in the movie is talk about men.
No, they also save a bunch of lives.
You know what? Let me rephrase that. The only thing they talk about before the war starts is like men. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, I think so. I think that's pretty accurate.
What do you think about that?
Half of my notes are about the relationship between Kate Beckinsale and Ben Affleck, so it's interesting that you bring that up. This movie is a little bit dated in the way it treats women in general, I think. I don't know who wrote this script. I'm guessing it wasn't a female. I did not write this script. Obviously, they did not ask my input. The characters, particularly the nurses, seemed somewhat two-dimensional, and they weren't given really a lot of agency or ability to drive the plot or interest. or really much of anything other than perhaps a slight lack of intelligence, which is
Ouch.
somewhat insulting. I mean, the one of them was super bimbo-y,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's not until the end of the movie that we get to see a different side of them.
In a scene that reminded me of Captain America, the First Avenger, not just pilots, but I think just army soldiers are getting shots and like eye exams and all sorts of medical stuff. And so we get a shot of Rafe, who is, like we said, we've hinted at, or it's heavily hinted that he's dyslexic, and so he's getting in line for the eye exam where Kate Beckinsale is. And he like has memorized and he has written down on paper what the bottom line is. Spouts it off so fast that Evelyn is suspicious, and so she instead has him read the very top line, read the bottom, but backwards, and only every other letter. So he gets all tripped up, and he makes this plea to her that's like, "Don't fail me." It's not his eyesight; it's just he has trouble reading letters sometimes. And she's like, "Well, maybe with proper schooling." He's like, "No, I've had schooling. They just didn't know what to do with it."
It seems very realistic that in World War II they wouldn't have sensible accommodations for people who can't read.
I mean,
like,
they
look at the
wouldn't
shapes.
know what dyslexia is at that point, I think. I don't know. Actually, don't know when dyslexia was officially like diagnosed and discovered.
I believe it.
She decides that she's going to pass him.
Well, it helps that he has a cute butt.
Well, that's not till later.
I know, I was joking.
This scene reminded me, or the movie in general, every once in a while reminded me of Skyward, which is the Brandon Sanderson book about a pilot squadron.
Which I apparently should read.
Is it based in reality?
Mm-mm.
No.
It's a fantasy world?
Yes,
Yeah,
but
it's
it's
a
not
fantasy
part
world.
of... What's his universe
Cosmere.
called? The Cosmere. Hashtag not sponsored by Brandon Sanderson.
Okay.
Hashtag Brandon Sanderson, please sponsor. Just sponsor my life. Love Brandon Sanderson. Hashtag not an ad. And I quite enjoyed the book Skyward as well as its sequel. And that scene in particular reminded me of the book for the vast audience of Brandon Sanderson fans who also listen to the Spy Pie Guys. This comment is for you. We have a main character, the protagonist, who is kind of on the outside and like kind of trying to work hard to get on the inside, and all they want to do is fly.
I really need to read this book.
Yeah. Same thing with Gattaca. If you guys remember that movie, all the main character wants is to go to space.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be a common thing with movie protagonists.
Yeah, that's their want. Something that hopefully every movie character has is a want.
If it's a well-written movie, unlike Get Smart. Ew.
Oh, wow, going back to that. Anyways, we come back to Rafe, who steals another soldier's chart, and so he can go over to see Evelyn and thank her.
Yeah, and then she starts giving him needles in the butt talks.
Well, which he had already had.
As it turns out, he'd already had. Okay, so what do we think about this scene? I thought it was like her abusing her power at first to like mess with him, but then it turns out it was a fairly honest mistake on her part. But I still say that the cute butt thing was very unprofessional.
She didn't say it. She just may have thought it, but she didn't actually say it until later on.
That's true.
She says that as she's retelling it to her colleagues.
Okay. But yes, I think it's supposed to be funny that he keeps getting needles into his rear end.
I mean,
I didn't particularly find it that funny personally, but okay.
She figures out that he has already gotten this shot. When he starts to slur his words and when he's trying to say, "I really like you," he says instead, "I really lick you." I was like, wait, what?
Oh yeah, that was just peak comedy too.
I couldn't believe, although I guess I could believe, they were making light of, I don't want to call it a medical issue exactly, but I was concerned. Like, if you shouldn't be getting a shot twice, like, what happens to you? Should you be, like,
right.
No one seemed to care or address that aspect of it at all. But that was what was in my head, was, oh no, he got the shot twice. What are the medical repercussions of that?
I mean, my headcanon is that, all right, the nurses who are trained medical professionals know that, all right, if he would just get, woozy or something, so they're not so concerned about that in the story. They're just concerned. But he gets woozy, he falls over, hits his head.
So again, it's more slapstick comedy, which is unusual to see Ben Affleck doing. And while I have the floor, I would actually disagree with you, Sarah. I felt like Kate Beckinsale's reaction to realizing that he had the wrong meds was appropriately concerned. But that's me.
I mean, I guess she had some concern in her voice. It wasn't clear to me that she did anything.
Okay.
Evelyn and her other nurse colleagues are exiting, and Rafe is there with a ridiculously bandaged nose.
Yeah, again, it's supposed to be funny, I think. Haha, he looked so dumb with his bandaged nose. He does look dumb.
Was it?
I thought so.
Okay.
I mean, he makes a reference this is mostly precautionary, even though it looks pretty terrible.
Okay, Sarah, would you like the floor to talk about this scene?
I'll be very brief. As I adjust to lean forward in my chair. All right. Ben Affleck does not give up. And I know as the audience, we are supposed to find this very charming and endearing. I want someone who doesn't give up on me. And that happens in a lot of movies. Mm-hmm. Girl says no, and then the guy keeps going, and we're like, oh, that's so cute. I hope they get together. And then they do, and they live happily ever after. I think that's a huge problem in movie tropes. And I think this movie exacerbates that problem. That, listen, bud, she says no. She said no. She doesn't want to date you. Don't stalk her. Don't wait for her and try to... I'm making this pounce gesture with my hands. Don't waylay her as she's coming out of a building to ask her for a date. She has already said no. How annoying would it be in real life for any woman to continuously get accosted by the same guy? That's harassment. That's illegal. The reason in the movie sphere that we're okay with it is because he's kind of attractive. And that's really the lesson of the movie. We're okay with it because he's kind of good looking. And that's kind of a messed up message to take. This should be a big warning title card at the beginning of this movie to tell everyone to respect boundaries, and no means no. And I wish there were, as part of the rating system, the PGR rating system, there should be a, man is not respecting women, rated R.
It's interesting how this keeps coming up with movies Sarah has covered with us. It didn't happen in Sergeant Stubby, but it did happen in Austin Powers.
I would say Austin Powers, yes.
Though, of course, the classic example of this is Han Solo. He's probably, in The Empire Strikes Back, is probably the first and best example.
I doubt that he's the first example, but it is a good example of this trope.
Yep.
What I took away from this is just seeing Ben Affleck in more pain, which I thought was hilarious.
No, I was mad that he was being a creepy stalker. And at this point in the movie, I was furiously writing down my thoughts, my visceral reactions, and I thought, I hate this movie. I can't believe, of course, this is why they wanted me on for this movie. Now it all makes sense. It's coming together. And I had expected kind of that trend to continue. But up until this point, I was like, this movie sucks. It's boring. He hates women. I have a huge problem with this movie.
Okay, I would like to step in on this. Sarah, it seems like your reaction to this was much, much stronger than Austin Powers, which is interesting because I thought Austin Powers as a character was way worse. He said much more inappropriate things to the object of his desire than Rafe.
I have a huge problem with Austin Powers. I did not care for the movie. Mm-hmm. But what's, I think, more insidious about this portrayal is that it's not a caricature. It's not something that we're supposed to think is a problem. Austin Powers, although I didn't enjoy watching it, the audience is supposed to know that it's a farce, that it's something that we're supposed to, everything he does, we're supposed to think it's bad. That being said, I still don't enjoy or support watching those types of things anyway. So that includes a lot of James Bond movies, that includes Austin Powers. It isn't something I enjoy watching. But yeah, this stealthy anti-feminism and this stealthy suggestion, encouragement to break boundaries. This feels more insidious. It's because we're not supposed to think it's bad. We're supposed to think it's charming. We're supposed to think that this is the right way for men to behave. This is what a romantic love looks like. And I don't think that's what romantic love looks like.
I see. Thank you for
Fellas.
parsing the difference. I have
Okay.
one last thing about this scene, which is this is the scene that contains the infamous. I don't remember all the details. I don't think it'll be anyone's favorite quote, which is "My heart hurts. No, I think it's my nose that hurts," which is like famous for being so terrible.
I mean, I remember the line because I've seen this movie a lot, but I
Yeah.
do not remember that being an infamous line. I love you so much it hurts, or something.
Oh,
Or
yeah,
you're
yeah,
so
yeah,
beautiful
that's
it
it.
hurts, or something like that. Yeah.
It says, I think it's my nose that hurts. He says, I think it's my heart. Okay. The reason why it
Yeah.
keeps coming up is because I keep Googling cheesy lines from movies for a panel we do at AwesomeCon, and this keeps showing up, but it's too short to do in a scene.
Hmm.
So it jumped out to me, but
All
time
right.
to move on, I think.
Oh yes, Kate Beckinsale views his being injured as I don't know what, falls for him and they kiss. And so back on the train, as she's telling this story to all her nurse friends, she says it's been the best 4 weeks and however many days. And so they're going to go meet up with him and all his pilot buddies at a jazz club in New York City.
And at this point is when I recognize Jennifer Garner as one of the nurses.
Right?
She's wearing glasses.
So this is before her big break, before she was anyone. That's why she has such a small role here. But also, so we get a shot of all the pilots getting ready, including Rafe and Danny. One of the guys, he tells his buddies, all right, yeah, put this under your eye drops and like well up and say, they're training me to be a big bad war hero to get their attention, basically. We see various guys trying to talk up some of the nurses and a bunch of them striking out. Rafe and Evelyn are dancing, and Rafe has not told Evelyn that he's going to be going away yet, so he's keeping that secret. Sneak off and go to see New York by boat. Go and see New York Harbor and not drive. What's the word? What would the word be?
You pilot a boat.
Yeah, but but
You
they
can drive a
cruise.
boat.
They cruise. Yeah, they cruise by. I think it's the Queen Mary, because they're talking. And they're talking about how when the world's calmer, we can take a cruise like this, dress for cocktails, and have fancy dinners. At which point he gets them up on a platform. They have a little makeout session up there, and then they knock the lever so it drops them from that height.
Yeah, more slapstick comedy at Ben Affleck's expense, which does not sustain through the rest of the movie.
Apparently, what Michael Bay has said is that the first half of this movie, he was trying to make it like a 40s slapstick kind of comedy for all the romantic stuff.
Oh, complete with the male gaze.
So it seems like everyone else is in like an apartment. They're having a grand old time partying. But this is when Rafe reveals to Evelyn that he's going away. Not just going away, but going away the next day.
That's right. And I think the idea is it's like a sleazy move. It's like I saw an Israeli comedian once who's like, I'm leaving for the Golan Heights tomorrow. Touch it. That was like his pickup line. So anyway, but he can't follow through with it because he's such a noble guy. Rafe is, that is.
Yeah. And so he tells Evelyn, all right, don't come to see me off at the train station.
So I like this part. It felt very real. You see it in other war movies like Hacksaw Ridge, where he meets the girl of his dreams right when he's about to leave. So they write each other letters throughout the whole war.
So my reaction, obviously I'm going to have a reaction, right? As far as the movie timeline goes, we go from being super mad at the portrayal of the relationship and how they got together to an admittedly kind of cute rapport between the two of them. And they look really happy. And I thought, okay, well, if it continues on this trajectory, I knew that the movie was kind of a love story. And I thought, okay, I'll learn to love them as a couple. So that's where my head was at. Just so, again, hadn't seen the movie before. Just so you know, that's what I was thinking during that scene. And then I thought, oh, they're too happy. One of them is going to die.
Oh, if only.
The other thing that I thought was interesting about that scene in particular was that the most romantic thing that he could do in that moment was not sleep with her. And in the moment, I really appreciated that. See feminist rant here. If that's the pinnacle of, romantic action is, I will respect your boundaries. It was like, okay. Like, I'm stalking up to you or whatever. But then I realized later in the movie that I have very different thoughts about that. I will save my thoughts for later because it is a plot spoiler.
Okay.
But I have, throughout the movie, I mentally have returned to that scene and then got mentally so mad. But at the time, I was like, "Aw, that's so sweet." And then we go to the stupid test. So there's a lot of up and downs here. There's a lot of, ugh, I hate this. I hate them as a couple. Oh, they're so cute. Oh, that's so nice. He's respecting her boundaries. I can get through this. And then the test. If she loves me, she won't listen to me, and she'll show up anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. No, thank you. No, thank you. It's once again the expecting words and actions not to meet each other. You know, believe women. People mean what they say, and that's why they say it. If someone says, "Don't come," or someone says, "I want you to come," you shouldn't assume that they secretly mean the opposite. And was a recurring theme, and then I got mad again. So
Yeah, the whole thing of like, if she comes, then she really loves me was mind-boggling. It didn't make any sense. And why was it even here?
I don't know. So that you could get the dramatic scene of Evelyn running to the train station, even though because she's late to try to catch him, and the dramatic irony of she's there and he can see her and he's knocking on the window, but she doesn't hear him, and I don't know.
It felt very Romeo and Juliet, particularly the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Romeo and Juliet, in which they sort of, in that one they wake up and they see, spoiler alert for I guess Romeo and Juliet, they wake up and they see each other in that director's vision, but generally, they wake up, they see the other one, and they're like, "Oh, it's dead. I'm gonna kill myself," and then kind of the same thing.
Vice
and it felt
versa.
a little bit like that. So it felt a little Romeo and Juliet, and the movie again is sort of oscillating and tearing me between these like heart-wrenching moments, like the scene that I think we skipped over it. Where the bromance is happening and they're talking and they're seeing each other off to war. Like that was a genuinely heart-touching moment. And then so once again we had the movie like getting me angry and then getting me feels. The boy and the girl keep missing each other, interjected with these like weirdly jarring moments about a bad relationship.
Sounds like a Michael Bay film.
I think you're expecting a lot from the writing of the romance. I basically just turned my brain off anytime they were together. And I was sort of hoping we were not going to talk about it, but I
Good
guess
luck.
I was wrong.
I'm sorry. I'll stop. Mostly.
No.
Share your opinions. It's fine.
So we next go into another newsreel, which tells us about Eagle Squadron, and it I like this transition. It transitions from that, like the newsreel footage into real footage. Yes.
You know what else the movie did black and white into color? Michael Collins. A great movie. So anyway,
I will not dignify that with a comment.
Okay, so he gets to England, and Vincent Van Gogh from the Doctor Who episode with Vincent Van Gogh gives him some bad news.
Is that him? I did not recognize him. Huh.
That's right.
And they're looking in pretty rough shape. They're repairing planes like right on the runway there. He sees his plane that the guy who piloted it previously died inside of it.
Yeah, it's a bloody plane. You see what I did there?
That was shocking. Inheriting the very gruesome plane that someone brutally died in. There was brain matter and blood, and the glass was broken. And knowing that you are going to go up in it next would be difficult.
Yeah, there's a scene that we skipped over, but I'll say briefly. There's a part where Danny gives Rafe like a very realist perspective. He's like, why are you in such a hurry to get into the war? People die in a war. You could die in a war, so treat it seriously. There's a little bit of that stuff in the movie, but they don't follow through. Like, I don't think they gave this bloody plane enough breathing room to really make that a well-developed part of the movie. Kind of wish they did, but the movie's really long, so you had to make a compromise somewhere.
And next we go to the White House. We have FDR, played by Angelina Jolie's dad.
I didn't even recognize him as FDR. Yeah.
You mean Wait, what is his actual name now?
John Voight.
That's
like,
the one.
He had the prosthetics or
He
something.
does have prosthetics on there. Yeah, that's John Voight.
That's her father?
Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. I actually don't remember what happens this scene.
Basically, he's just trying to
Oh,
convince
that's right.
the
This is that
staff
scene. Yeah, he's
to send more
they
supplies.
need more supplies.
I think at this point, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. My brain must have been like, boop, 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 boop. What I wrote down was, I think the best Churchill was probably in The Crown. I also appreciated the Churchill from Doctor Who. Who is your favorite Churchill?
Yeah, I guess that's relatable. I mean, obviously the Gary Oldman one in Darkest Hour was really good because he actually talked like Winston Churchill actually did, which is like kind of high pitched and nasally. But the Doctor Who one's good too.
Yeah. So next we go to Japan. We meet Admiral Yamamoto. This is a lot of information that was repeated from Tora Tora Tora, basically, where we find out that the Japanese army has started to invade China, and also that the U.S. is having an embargo on them. Admiral Yamamoto seemingly gets inspiration of how he's going to do his attack by seeing kids flying kites.
The Japanese are much more sympathetically portrayed in the beginning of the movie than later. Like, they don't come off as like the bad guys in this part.
I don't know. I kind of think they do.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, well, later in the movie, they have like these scary drums that play every time the Japanese
I don't
are
know
on
that there
screen.
were. Well, I mean, those are like taiko drums. It's not necessarily scary, but okay.
All right.
I did notice later that they were a little bit more faceless and a little bit more like kind of otherized.
Absolutely.
But what I noticed in this scene, the captions were, I wrote down the word that the captions were entertaining. I don't know if the captions were entertaining, but they did have quote unquote speaking Japanese as the subtitle, which on my screen actually covered up the English translation of what they were saying, which was embedded in the movie. And I thought maybe they shouldn't block the English translation with speaking Japanese.
I'm going to be charitable and think it was just some technical mistake.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure
I
it
would
was,
hope
I'm sure
so.
it was a technical error.
Yeah.
Did you recognize one of the Japanese officials, Zach?
So I recognize him, but I'm afraid of saying who he is because you're going to think I'm racist.
It's Kari Hiroyuki Tagawa, who played Shang Tsung in the Mortal Kombat series, as well as a bunch of other stuff.
Isn't he in Man in the High Castle?
Yes, he is, yes.
Yeah, that's probably what I recognized him from.
I recognized him from Man in the High Castle.
He was also in, I think he was in License to Kill.
Okay.
Well, yeah, so next we go to the nurses who are all arriving in Pearl Harbor. And
is that actually Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the stuff that's in the water and all that stuff is Pearl Harbor. But other stuff like, anything that could be a set, probably actually just a set. But yeah, so then they're getting a tour of the harbor and they're seeing basically all the men who are on all the ships, and like one of them is like counting like all the different how many men there are basically, and the odds are in their favor is what they say.
See, that's the only thing they talk about. But by the way, I didn't look this up for Spy Fact versus Fiction, but I'm pretty sure that fraternization is like heavily frowned upon. It's like cheerleaders and NFL players. Well, there's just so many characters in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
We have Evelyn, and she is like a crew, and then we have the pilots, and they have two crews. So many people.
Yes, but I could because they seem to have distinct personalities. I could keep track of them better than in Tora Tora Tora.
Do they?
In context, where our people in Tora 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 were real life characters, but they got like zero personality.
Yeah, they were basically just delivering exposition.
Yeah, these guys actually have a personality. Like, okay, you got Red, who's the one who stutters. Okay, you can remember him. All right, Billy and the other guy, they're forgettable. But then you have Rafe. And then you have Goose, played by, what's his face? Michael Shannon, who's just weird and out there. So he at least, he's different.
Yeah, they actually had someone, I think it was Goose, but it sounded a lot like Goose. And I thought... And this comes out Top Gun, right? That was intentional.
I would think so. Yeah.
He reminded me a lot of Rami Malek's character from The Pacific. If you guys have seen The Pacific, Rami Malek is in it as one of the Marines, and he seems crazy even before they get into combat. Like, he seems like Michael Shannon's character was like totally loopy. Seems like he's gonna go nuts and start shooting his own guys at like any second. So yeah, we meet him and he's building a surfboard and he's like gonna
Well,
make $1
not
million
just building a
off.
surfboard, but he's adding a fin to it.
Oh, they didn't have fins before that?
Fact versus fiction.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, we have the pilots who meet, the local pilots on the ground in Hawaii, including Goose and Earl. And then we have Rafe, writing letters to Evelyn, talking about how terrible the fighting is, how it's not how I imagined it would be. And Evelyn's writing these romantic things about how of soaking in every sunset's last energy and sending it from my heart to yours.
It felt a little cliche, and I do love the cheesy stuff, but the writing from the front and the postcard-looking picture of Hawaii felt a little bit too much. Yeah, felt a little cliche.
To be fair, though, and you'll attest to this, Sarah, Hawaii does look like that.
Oh, for sure. And in fact, I loved seeing all of the Hawaii things. Every time I just heard the word Hawaii or there was any reference to Hawaii, I was like, squeeze, I live here. And it was great.
Perfect movie for you, then.
Yeah.
So next we go to Admiral Kinney, who we met last week.
I think you mean Admiral Kimmel.
Kimmel, thank you.
And he is saying what we learned in Tora Tora Tora, that Pearl Harbor is too shallow to be attacked with torpedoes, but they're worried about sabotage, so they're putting all their planes together, which will make them a really easy target.
Well, easier to watch. And as if to completely counter the fact, they're saying that it's too shallow for torpedo attack and all of that sort of stuff, we next go back to Japan, where they've got this really sweet setup of like model boats of all the battleships.
Mm-hmm.
This is one thing that I was annoyed with last week, is they say that they have adjusted so the torpedoes can travel through the shallower depth of Pearl Harbor. They don't tell us how. And here they actually show us how. All right, they've added wooden fins that would elongate the body of it to make it so that they would actually be able to travel in the harbor.
That's right. I appreciated that.
Yeah, I appreciated that as well. And next we get the dramatic scene. Rafe talking with the Brit RAF guy, and the alarms go off. Call sign is, I think, Red 1, and we hear Red 2 and Red 4, which of course made me think of Star Wars.
That's right. They even say things like, he's on my tail, I can't shake him, and someone says, pull up Red 1. So, of course, Star Wars was based on World War II movies. So I guess
those dogfights, yeah.
Right.
It's like I said before, if what's inspiring what, depending on how you see, what order you see things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's also dogfighting in the Brandon Sanderson book, just for an extra little plug.
Brandon Sanderson does his own spin on it, I guess.
Yeah. So he managed to take out a couple of the guys, but then he gets one right on his tail. Oh, and there was a dropped line. The mechanic fixed a bunch of stuff, but the oil line is still leaky. So as he's dogfighting, he gets oil spray all over his face. So engine fire starts, and he gets shot down.
Yeah, he even has like a death spiral at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And what he says as his plane is going down, he says, like, oh my God. And I felt like that is, or at least his expression, relayed what I think someone might feel if, as their plane was being shot down.
Yeah, I thought this was well acted by Ben Affleck here.
Yeah. I have the note that I wrote, which is only funny in retrospect, is he died a lot sooner than I thought.
Come on, you really thought he died?
Well, so I thought, I didn't write out my feminist rants, I just read out my random thoughts. Probably should have prioritized my intellectual arguments a little bit. I wrote, it's less than a third of the way in. When he crashed in the water, I thought, that's survivable. They make a point of writing into the story that he shot through the window thing, but when they cut to the Josh Hartnett scene, I was like, oh, I guess he did die.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, the part where he pulled the gun out, if it weren't for a main character, I thought he might have shot himself, which is what World War I pilots did.
Had a gun?
Yeah, I wondered.
In case.
Yeah, I wondered if that's where they were going with that. I'm glad they didn't, frankly. But I thought that it would be funny is not the right word, an odd writing choice to write in kind of an escape hatch for your main character and then not get foreshadowing.
Yeah, a literal escape hatch in his case.
Yeah.
One of the other pilots, Red, has a stutter. He does come into play later, and so he hooked up with one of the other nurses, Betty, who's like apparently only like 17 or 8. She lied about her age. We find out a little bit later, but I just put it in here. Who lied about her age to, join the Navy.
Yeah, this confused me because there's a part where they were like, wow, he's really playing up that stutter. So I was like, does he actually have a stutter, or is he just pretending to
Yes.
women feel bad for him?
What it made it seem like was that he has a stutter, but knows how to play it to give him sympathy, so that he'd be more attractive to the women.
Yeah, that eventually became clear later, including when his disability was played for hilarious laughs during the fight.
I didn't think that. Anyways, we'll get to it. So we next go to a boxing match. I don't actually know which ship this is supposed to be, but on one of the ships, and it's against Doris Miller, who is a cook on the West Virginia, if I recall. Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yeah, the part where they're like, so what's your job? And he says, a cook, reminded me of Finn in Star Wars saying, I work sanitation. So something I was wondering about is, this is in a lot of movies where two guys are boxing and someone's like, taking bets. Who you got? And I want to know is, how do they pay people back? Because no one's going to remember.
Someone has to take the bets, basically. So someone has to say, I'll cover that bet and all. Yeah.
No, I understand that, but like, you're not writing anything down. So I feel like, I guess people had better memories back then.
Maybe.
Who's going to remember like who bet for who and how much they put down? That's a lot to remember.
Their books are invisible. This scene was oozing with such toxic masculinity and was a hair unnecessary. IMO.
Can you like expand on that?
The scene in which we are introduced to and endeared to Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character is through a display of physical strength through boxing. And it is only because he is the underdog and yet can physically overtake another sailor that we're supposed to like him. Kind of going back to some other themes that we've already discussed. We're supposed to like this character because of this kind of display of masculinity. So they make it clear that in this boxing scene, and several times throughout, after we meet the cook, that he is physically strong. And you'd think that kind of physicality, that kind of strength training type of skill would come into play a little bit more than it does. He does do something, and we know that he's going to do something because we spend a lot of time with him, getting to know him. But the focus of his character is, I can punch you in the face, and that's why we're supposed to like him.
Disagree with that. Not strong, but I would disagree with that point in that, and we'll get a little more into this into the next scene about basically how he is just, he's a cook and he joined so that he could, serve his country, and they made him a cook, and there's the overtones of racism because he is a black sailor.
Enjoyed that aspect of his character development. The part that I didn't necessarily think was necessary was the boxing, because that's our introduction to him. That's our window into him and into what everybody else, what all of the sailors think of as positive traits.
So usually I'm pretty sympathetic to your opinion, Sarah, but I would also disagree with you. And I also see toxic masculinity in other movies we've covered. But I think what we like about Dory Miller here is not that he can physically overpower the other guy, but rather that he is fighting for respect, which we talk about later. He doesn't back down from a challenge, and he doesn't give up even when the odds are against him. And that's what's endearing to him, not the fact that he can beat up somebody. That's my read.
I agree. That makes sense. That is why I find him as endearing as a character. I can empathize with that.
We'll also point out the fact that the guy who he's fighting against is, I think they even call it out, he's a mechanic. He shits rivets or something like that is what they say. So it's more of an underdog fight necessarily. So next scene is Doris Miller getting patched up by Evelyn. This is where we get his backstory that he, like I said earlier, that he joined the Navy to serve his country, see the world, and they made him a cook. He said he never even fired a gun the whole time during his training. He has basically just been, there to cook and to clean up after other soldiers after they eat, and he has he feels like he's been put down basically, even though he's supposed to be part of the same Navy.
I mean, I don't like he was put down, obviously.
Right. I get the feeling like he feels like if someone would just give him a chance to prove himself, and he could get the respect that he wants, which is what happens later.
And after he gets all patched up, we next get a shot of Danny approaching her little clinic in full uniform, and you can just see from his eyes that he's come to tell her that Rafe is dead.
That's right.
And so they have a sweet scene where they're talking about Rafe and how he was always protecting Danny, and this is when it revealed Evelyn knows that he volunteered for this. Whereas Danny thought that he was assigned to this, and there you go, Rafe trying to protect me once again.
Yeah, there's a lot of telling and not showing about their relationship in this part. We really have two scenes, one of them as kids and one of them as bros. I don't think it's a very solid foundation to build the love triangle on, in my opinion.
It worked for me.
Okay.
I have feelings about the love triangle, but we'll get to that. So this is one of those moments. I'm such a sucker for it. When, Josh Hartnett told Kate Beckinsale that Rafe died, I really like this scene from a filmmaking perspective, as dorky as that sounds, because there's just this wordless communication that happens, and it fully takes advantage of the visual medium while also packing an emotional punch. And like I said, I'm just a sucker for it.
And this is, I think, where we also get and I should have talked about this earlier, but the very that theme music that permeates this whole movie, the da na na, all that stuff, which it works for me. And I found out when I was watching the credits, it's Hans Zimmer. Of course, that's why it works.
I think I've seen other movies where people are delivered sad news and they are crying and there's no dialogue. I agree with Sarah that it works really well that way, but I also kind of feel like that way a screenwriter doesn't have to write dialogue for when someone's been told that the love of their life just died. Because that would be kind of tough to write. I don't know what you would say.
That would be a part, tough dialogue. But writers have I think,
greater challenges.
Yeah, that's why they're the professionals.
So we get a shot in a bar where they all give a toast to Rafe, photo up on the wall, and have it marked as killed in action.
Yes, as opposed to the ones that say killed in training, which I thought was interesting. They include that.
Then we go back to the Japanese fleet, which is preparing to launch. They're sending out messages for the U.S. to intercept. They already know. So here's where we get our first spy action in this movie.
That's right. Just like Tora Tora Tora, it's mostly signals intelligence for what the Japanese are doing.
Yes. Say they're going to send out message for the U.S. to intercept, so they know that they can already read it. But they send it and that they're potential targets for an attack everywhere in the Pacific. And they say, and, include Hawaii too, just to confuse them even further. So it's not like we're trying to say it's everywhere but here by causing suspicion that way. And next we go to someplace familiar to all of us, back to DC, and a building that has a giant sign that says Navy Department. Where is this? I've never seen this before.
Oh, look at me. I think they might have just made it up for the movie.
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing that in Spy Factors versus Fiction Research.
And so we meet our character who's basically the stand-in for all the U.S. Navy intelligence people, who is Captain Harold Thurman, played by Dan Aykroyd.
That's right.
And he's like, I'm not buying it. I don't think it's an attack here. Or attack over in the Pacific, that place. So we go to 3 months later in the movie theater, and the movie playing is The Great Dictator, starring what's his face,
Charlie Chaplin.
That's it.
Come on, Christian.
But before the movie, they have a newsreel showing footage of planes getting shot down, which of course makes both Evelyn and Danny, who are in the theater, think about Rafe, and they both exit the theater and run into each other.
I appreciated that moment where they leave, because showing that those characters were affected by seeing that didn't just move the story along, but it teases the reality of PTSD. And so I appreciated that. I thought they would actually address it a little bit more, and I'm kind of bummed that they didn't, but it turns out that was just a plot device to get them to stand next to each other and talk.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be PTSD so serious. It's more that they saw something that reminded them of their buddy and love of their life, so they leave. It works. I don't think we were so enlightened about PTSD even in 2000.
They run into each other. They mention that both have been avoiding each other, have dinner, and they start talking about Rafe. And then we cut over to the other soldiers who are out. Red is proposing to his girl Betty, and he can't quite get it out.
Yeah, but basically what Evelyn is getting at is life needs to go on and she needs to go on living and can't be sad about Rafe forever. I think it's actually it's very common for people to say, oh, she's my only love, I'll never love anyone else. I think it was true in Titanic, coming back to that.
How do you know, since you haven't seen it?
Because I've heard that complaint about Titanic was this old lady who's like, yeah, I married some other guy, but I didn't really love him. I only loved Jack, who I met when I was 17. It's like, sorry, her husband. I guess she didn't love you.
Watch the movie and we'll see how you feel. As they're having dinner, or Evelyn and Danny, that is, spotted by the other pilots and nurses. They get a little weird about it. All right, yeah, it's time to go. But as she leaves, she forgets her handkerchief, which Danny sees, grabs, and then waits an inordinately long time to try to return to her, probably like midnight or something. He was enduringly awkward here.
Sarah, what did you think about this move?
They get dinner together, and I'm like, oh no, they're going to be a couple now. And that's why, back to Ben Affleck didn't sleep with her. And I thought, oh my God, that's why he didn't sleep with her, so that she stays a virgin. And so she has this special quality to her. And now I am super angry at this movie. Not that I have an issue with her moving on, because as Zach said, that's a sign of healthy mental state, for lack of a better word. But these characters have not interacted with each other at all. I do not believe their relationship at any point in this movie. I do not buy it. I do not believe that they're in love with each other, despite the fact that with the handkerchief, he is kind of endearing. I don't buy it. I hate that, previous plot decisions were made to make her virginal and perfect, and I did not care for that. On the flip side, vis-a-vis everyone telling her to move on, I thought, you know what? The person she loved died. She's allowed to take a couple of minutes. Give the homegirl some space to grieve. Everyone grieves a little bit differently. And other people pressuring her to move on, I felt was not necessarily what friends should be doing.
I see. I have some thoughts. So, okay, how do you think the movie would have gone over if Danny was portrayed more as like a villain? By which I mean he's like this sleazy dude who like makes a move on his best friend's girl because he sees that she's emotionally vulnerable, can be a shoulder to cry on, and generally comes off not as romantic but as like slimy. And while you're thinking about that answer, I would like to mention Cold Hits, which is a mini series that we covered on my other podcast, Tuesday Night Gaming, plug, which was about Tom Hardy and Damian Lewis are two soldiers in World War II. And Tom Hardy is stuck in prison, and Damian Lewis comes back and tells Tom Hardy's girlfriend that Tom Hardy died so that he can make a move in on her. A much more interesting story than this one.
I think it's, and I don't know how common of a phenomenon this is, but I think the plot has come up in, this type of military love triangle has come up in a couple movies. I think Coming Home is the name of a movie where that also happened. Mm-hmm. So as pure speculation, would be interested to know if it's as common as is portrayed in cinema.
Okay, so do you guys have any thoughts about Danny being bad?
I think it would be in a completely different movie that I don't know if I'd be interested in. I don't know. It's a different movie. It
would definitely be a different movie. The dynamic would have been different from the jump. Part of what's...
You wouldn't have the bromance.
You wouldn't have bromance. Love the bromance. Also, Josh Hartnett as an evil guy, I just don't buy it. I mean, look at that cute face. Yeah.
Well, right. You would probably want to cast somebody else.
Could play it, because...
I think he could. I'm joking.
I'm
joking.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Anyway, so we go back to Dan Aykroyd at Naval Intelligence. We find out that the Japanese fleet is missing. They don't know exactly where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And we next go to Danny testing out the guns on his P-40, and then Evelyn comes into the hangar dressed in a very fancy red dress.
Yeah, she's looking good.
All the guys are acting awkward. Actually, they make comments about how you shouldn't be dating your best friend's your dead friend's gal. One says, I'd come back to life so fast if someone did that to me.
Yeah, it's already communicating to him that maybe this isn't such a good idea, even if Rafe doesn't come back from the dead.
I don't buy it. At this point in the movie, they've interacted with each other for 0.2 seconds and I see no chemistry.
I mean, I feel like they have about as much interaction at this point as Rafe and Evelyn did in the beginning of the movie when we are introduced to them.
You might recall, I did not care for that.
Fair enough.
Well,
fair
yeah,
enough.
that's not uncommon in movies. I actually thought it was interesting that Danny and Evelyn spend more time together, like in meat space, like in the real world, as opposed to letter writing, than Evelyn and Rafe did.
Takes Evelyn flying. They see Pearl Harbor at sunset from the air, which is beautiful. Pulls a Star Fox and does a barrel roll.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up Star Fox if you didn't.
And they, go and hide in the parachute hangar, end up kissing, and then have sex in the parachute hangar.
The parachute hangar itself made me actually laugh out loud.
Okay.
Imagining that on a military base. I mean, the set was beautiful. I don't think any military hangar looked that beautiful.
Well, it's still a Michael Bay movie, no matter where it takes place.
Yeah. Yes. And then we go to the morning after where they're, feeling kind of awkward around each other. Not sure how they're feeling necessarily, but Danny is like, I really like you. And okay, why not give this a try? This can be a new start for us in this new place.
Yeah, the note I have is that Evelyn's not sure about her feelings. Which is fair enough.
I think, is this when he's gushing about how excited he is about her? Because that was admittedly quite endearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And men, take notes.
Oh, you like this, Sarah? This worked for you?
This worked for me.
Okay, interesting.
Well, I've heard it before from other sources.
Back to the spy stuff. We have the Japanese are sending, a Japanese spy to Oahu. He books an air tour of Oahu, and he has a camera hidden in a case. Then he gets photos of Pearl Harbor from the air, sends those photos back to Japan.
It's just like Paul Rudd in The Catcher Was a Spy.
Yeah. Next, we get what I'm just going to call the love montage, where they, have all these beautiful shots of them in Hawaii swimming and spending time with each other. And I like this part where their car is stuck in the sand.
But then at the end of it, Evelyn is sick.
In the bathroom for a very long time. Back to the Navy Department. They're looking for the Japanese fleet. Captain Thurman, aka Dan Aykroyd, is saying he has a theory about where they're going, and he thinks it'd be Pearl Harbor. And when they ask why is this, well, it's what I would do.
Really liked the description of intelligence as playing chess in the dark. I thought that was a really nice visual. There are
ironically lack of a visual because it's in the dark.
There are blink and you'll miss it, intelligence analyst sections, and it felt like every so often the director was just like, we need to foreshadow some war stuff, and then they'd cut back to the actual movie.
Yeah, compared to Tora, where there'd be a whole scene about a specific thing, or this they just mentioned it and then move on. It also, the thing about Playing Chess in the Dark reminded me of other movies we've covered where it's about judgment calls, like 13 Days and Zero Dark 30. But when it comes to a war, suddenly it becomes much more prescient about decisions made on a very short-term basis.
Yeah. Is this the scene where it ends with, go get me more intelligence?
Yeah.
I agree that they shouldn't make such a huge decision on functionally a Spidey sense. But it is that guy's job to make decisions based on limited information. And I thought, go get me more information or whatever it was kind of a dumb command.
You're right. Yeah. Dan Aykroyd even says, yes, we're trying.
I think it shows the disconnect between the analysts and their bosses, where their bosses just want more of everything, and they don't care what it takes to get it.
So we go back to the Japanese fleet. They're preparing to launch. It's intercut with, Pearl Harbor. Get this Japanese dentist who's in Oahu who can see Pearl Harbor outside of his window. Gets a call from Japan. He's not sure who it is, and they're asking him questions about how many ships are there, what's the weather like, and this is all intercepted. And there's actually a young Japanese translator who's like intercepting the call and translating as.
Yeah, they say he's not a spy. He's just asking around. They also say, are there flat ships, i.e.
Yes.
carriers? He says no. So this scene was really interesting for a few reasons. So first, I was surprised that we never got to see the consequences of it. Like, I thought he was going to get arrested and thrown in prison. The fact that it didn't really go anywhere makes me kind of wonder why it was there in the movie. I mean, I was glad to have more spy stuff and less romance stuff, so as much of that as possible is nice. Also, this reminds me of a book called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Okay.
And one of the things that he points out is there's a default truth where even if it's weird that someone calls you up and starts asking you things outside of your window, it wouldn't occur to you that this guy's a spy, because how often would you ever meet a spy like in real life? So you're just going to answer his questions, especially back in the more innocent time of the 1940s.
Yeah. And next we get the scene where we find out that Rafe is actually alive. Danny gets like a telegram from him saying it was the first that he could get word out.
So Danny doesn't tell Evelyn right away, right? She just gets surprised.
I think he finds out pretty much the same time as she does.
I think so.
Okay.
And neither one of them look happy. I just want to jump into the screen and tell them, just be happy for 2 seconds. This individual who you are both very close to, you thought was dead, isn't dead. Be happy for 2 seconds. You can deal with your relationship drama in a minute. Someone who's you thought was dead has come back to life. Let's celebrate. Let's live in the present and let's celebrate that for a minute before focusing on relationship drama.
To be fair, they probably are happy, but they also have just very confused feelings about it on a whole.
Yeah, it's like, what does this mean for us? I guess it's a little bit self-indulgent that they're like, oh, how does this affect me rather than affect him?
Yeah, I guess my point is that that's a perfectly reasonable feeling, but I would hope that wouldn't be my first feeling. I would hope my first feeling wouldn't be, oh no, and now what am I going to do about my relationship? It's going to be, oh, thank God you're alive.
I feel like it's also more of just a general shock, too. Like, because they definitely thought he was dead. And so if you see someone who you think was dead, especially for Evelyn, I get the feeling like she sees him and she thinks it's like she's hallucinating.
It's pretty shocking.
I don't know how either of you are going to answer this, but Team Danny or Team Rafe?
Is neither an option?
I've thought about it and I don't have a good answer. And the reason is circumstance of the relationship. It was funny, as I was watching the movie, I was like, I hashtag Danny or my hashtag Rafe? From a who I like better perspective, that's a different question. If they were both in front of me, who would I pick is a different question than given the circumstances that they found themselves in. Because again, I didn't think that, we had seen a whole lot of relationship development. So I don't have a good answer yet.
We'll answer the other question then. The one that you proposed.
Would I pick?
Yeah.
If it were me?
Mm-hmm.
I do have an answer. What's your guess?
I don't know, actually. Go. Well, just.
I'm Team Danny.
Okay.
I picked Danny.
Wow.
I picked Danny.
Team Danny all the way.
I thought you were going to say Rafe because Danny and her have no chemistry.
Well, that's why it's a different question. Like, at this moment in time in the movie, who do I want her with? That's a different kind of question than who ultimately do I think is a better, like who would I pick up two of them? I think is a different question. I would pick Danny because I just generally find him more endearing. I like that he was willing to be vulnerable. I like the kind of sheepishness sort of paired with confidence. I'm being very revealing about on this podcast. Swipe right, fellas. Whereas, anyway, so I would pick Danny. Yeah, the classic American, like Captain America, like do-goodery type thing.
I wasn't talking about at this moment, but like, I figured this is a good moment since, hey, we have both of them now alive. I figured this is a good moment to just ask.
Yeah, and it was funny. It was at this point in the movie that I thought about it. And I had this dilemma within myself of, This is an interesting question.
This is a great example of something that I see a lot in movies now that I've caught on to it. Is depictions of men, especially when there's romance involved, is there's Luke Skywalkers and there's Han Solos.
Yeah.
Okay, so Luke Skywalker is really nice but kind of boring, and Han Solo is kind of a dick, but he's like exciting and fun, and all the ladies love him.
As someone who relates to Luke Skywalker, how dare you?
Well, come on, it's true.
I mean, hashtag Luke Skywalker. So I also think that, I mean, I won't get into my Star Wars who should end up with who, but it's controversial. Well, I'm a Luke Skywalker kind of girl, yeah.
Yeah, I'm picking up on that. But I will say that I appreciate that this movie actually didn't chicken out and had Evelyn make a choice, which is what I was expecting.
I don't think she did make a choice. I mean, she
we'll
didn't get to make the choice, did she? She didn't have any agency in her life decision. She wants to raise a kid with. Sarah's got some feelings about that.
Oh, yeah, I suppose that's true, actually.
Yeah.
When you put it that way.
Well, let's get there. We've got the whole battle to get through still.
Oh my god. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. I mean, I'm the one who broached this topic of who.
That was a more interesting question than what I asked earlier, which is who's your favorite Churchill?
We all have questions we want to know the answers to.
We go back to the Japanese fleet, and they're picking up radio from Honolulu, and they make the point of, all right, if there was any suspicion, we would hear about it on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And we next go to a tiki bar, where Rafe is seeing the rest of his pilot friends. You can see that he's had a few already. He's telling war stories, but then also starts making comments once he sees Danny there about how Danny was good enough to take care of his girls. Like, oh, I'm not liking this. He is
took real good care.
Yeah, and
I just realized that I didn't get to hear your hashtag Team Danny or hashtag this
is neither an option.
Yeah, well, I would have preferred neither, but I would agree with you that Danny is better. Ben Affleck came off as like a frat bro in this movie, which I did not find very attractive.
Yeah. I mean, especially here at this moment. Punches Danny, and there starts a whole bar fight. And then we get basically the only Hawaiian person in the movie at all, who's the bartender, who calls for the MPs.
Yeah, that didn't occur to me, but that is true.
Yep.
Yeah, that also didn't occur to me. That's a good point.
I mean, we did at least have other Asian people in the movie who were not the Japanese. Neither of them get names. Actually, yeah, none of them are the people, like people of color in Hawaii, other than Kubagu and Judy, obviously, but get names. They at least get lines, but they don't have names. So we have, the interpreter, we have the Japanese dentist, and then we have, the Hawaiian bartender. So the MPs arrive, they break out of the fight. Danny and Rafe say, they're going to throw us in the brig, let's get out of here. So they at least have enough sense to get out of there and aren't still trying to fight each other.
Yeah, they go from drunken fighting to drunk driving. Good times.
So they drive out of there, and then we get very dramatic calendar flip.
I wrote down that calendar flipping was very dramatic.
Again, it's a Michael Bay movie.
Yeah.
Which I did not know going into it that it was a Michael Bay movie. At the end, when his name came up, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That tracks.
Nah. Yeah.
That's funny. He's not at peak Michael Bay yet. I
feel like he was already with like Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2. This is him actually toning it down.
It definitely is toned down compared to other Michael Bay
movies. And then he goes back up to peak with Transformers.
Yep.
Did not care for Transformers. I could finish the movie.
We next go to a Japanese pilot who's like writing a letter back to his family. I appreciated this, actually, as you get some personality into the Japanese pilots.
This is also when we see scary drums, or rather, we hear
I don't think they're scary drums. I think they're just like Japanese drums, like taiko drums.
Sarah, tiebreaker.
I don't remember the drums.
Okay, fine.
I remember thinking...
I'll give you dramatic drums, not scary drums.
Okay, fine.
I don't remember feeling afraid. I do remember thinking that the depiction, they tried to make it, multidimensional, but I think it was a little bit one note. It felt like the movie wanted us to have the reaction, these are bad guys who believe that sacrificing themselves for their country is bad. But we in the United States also honor our military too. And I think it's an example of more cultural othering and a lack of understanding
Interesting.
that.
It's interesting because
Yeah.
I had the exact opposite reaction. Is that I actually like that they got some personality in there, or not personality, but like had some insight into
Yeah.
them and their viewpoints, and them drinking sake before they fly and the tying in their headbands. So I saw as all right, you're giving some just seeing at least a little bit of what their thought process was.
That is interesting because I took it as like, oh, so they're identifying the enemy by this headwear, and we know these are bad planes because there's a Japanese flag on it. Like that's.
I mean, that is what their design was in real
fair.
life.
I wonder if the perspective that I came to it with was partially from my Middle East background and learning, there's a fine line between saying that you understand the culture and otherizing it. Like, I remember one class I took about Middle East culture, quote unquote, was, showing someone the bottom of your feet is rude. So don't put feet up on your desk or whatever. That's what it is in Middle Eastern culture. I thought, that's kind of rude in American culture as well. Like, take a breath and take a second before, have a second of introspection. The military, came up a lot. All these, it's those people that are willing to sacrifice themselves, and that's bad when they do it, but it's good when we do it. So that's the perspective and baggage that I brought to this.
I'm wondering what you would have thought of Tora 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 now, actually, because that movie is pretty much a half Japanese, half American production, and so you get equal time with both sides. But it comes sort of at the expense of any sort of characterization of anyone.
Interesting.
That's right. That story reminds me of a conversation I had with a guy from Tunisia, and he talked about how in Tunisia the military is not respected. It's seen as that's where all the screw-ups go who can't find a job somewhere else, and they basically just do what the government tells them to do, as opposed to free independent thinkers like people who are not in the military. So it's quite a contrast to Americans, especially in a post 9/11 era.
Back to the movie, so they tie their headbands around their heads, and they launch the planes. There's a lot of excitement, and we next go to our two radar operators who we met last week in Tora Tora Tora. They're picking up a large signal, too large to be just one plane, so they call it up the chain, and the guy who answers the phone says, "Oh, that's probably just the fleet of B-17s that's coming in from the mainland."
I did like how the guy was like, "That's a lot of B-17s," which he did not say in Tora Tora Tora. Yeah. It felt very real.
And we go to Admiral Kimmel playing golf, and as he's playing golf, he gets a notification that one of their destroyers sunk a miniature submarine trying to enter Pearl Harbor, which we did see last week in Tora Tora Tora. This is where a lot of the stuff that is from Tora Tora is going to actually start overlapping from what we saw here. And we next go back to Dan Aykroyd, who's decrypting a message, which says, destroy the all decoder machines after you receive this message. And he's like, oh, the Japanese are anticipating a war.
Did we?
Not just anticipating one, actively preparing for one,
right?
It turns out.
And next we get, Zeros. Japanese planes are called Zeros, or at least the fighters. The bombers are called something else, if I recall. I don't know what they were called. But they're flying through the island. We actually see a shot of them flying through Kualoa Ranch, which is on the wrong side of the island for them if they're flying in from the north.
That's all right.
But Kualoa Ranch is famous for a lot of stuff filming there, including Jurassic Park.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a contrast here where the planes fly by Boy Scouts and a baseball game.
The baseball field, I think I looked at it once, and I don't think it's a baseball field where it's portrayed that there's this like right near the base, and I think the nearest baseball field is one near my house. So I've always sort of imagined, all right, if this was the actual scene, it would have been the baseball field going up to the hill to my islands or to my house, since I live, right on the mountain behind Pearl Harbor.
I can see a baseball field from my window.
Is it the same baseball field? No. It's more
Probably
than one.
not.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reason why I bring up the baseball field is because in History Buffs, which is the YouTube video I used for Spy Fact versus Fiction last week, he pointed to this as one of examples of like the flag-waving patriotism of Pearl Harbor. Because in contrast to Tora Tora Tora, it was Asian farmers.
Right.
right? So
Well,
I
Asian
thought
American plantation
Yes.
workers.
Yes, you're right. There is a contrast there. I don't really see a baseball game and Boy Scouts as like flag waving patriotism. I didn't really see where he was coming from on that.
We'll give you that. Yes, it would have been nice to actually show actual, like I said before, very little actual Asian characters. Even though Hawaii was largely populated by Asian immigrants, especially plantation workers at that time.
Mhm.
So I can kind of see it, but also I just like the reaction of the ordinary people seeing planes and what's going on.
Mhm.
And next, we go back to Captain Thurman. I think it's my note here says hostility is imminent, but I don't remember who gets this message. I presume it's Captain Thurman.
I also wrote hostility is imminent. I wrote what I'm guessing is an autocorrect because I wrote broken relationship. Period. Hostility is imminent.
Oh yes, yes.
Period.
No, that is him decrypting more
Right.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a teletype thing.
Yeah.
I remember that.
So Evelyn is still asleep at her house. Apparently, she slept on the couch that night because she was so stressed out.
But that is a nice house that they live at.
Right? Well, it's like all the nurses live in that one house. But yes, it is a nice house.
They almost certainly would have been living in some kind of barracks or military housing in real life, I think.
I mean, the military housing in Hawaii is pretty nice.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah, right?
There's way more
I've
nurses
seen it.
than just the 5 of them or so.
Yeah. And we go to Doris Miller, who's, serving the captain his food. And the captain tells him, we're proud. The ship's proud of you, son.
Yeah, the captain's so nice.
Mm-hmm. So next we get a bunch of shots of like all the sailors seeing like the planes flying in. And then there's also Rafe and Danny asleep in the car. There's a photographer taking shots of just the water or something nearby. And
Yeah, the photographer looked really familiar. I
um,
think he's been in like comedy movies. I don't remember his name,
probably.
and I don't really care to look it up. I'm just saying he looked familiar to me.
And then, so yeah, we have the planes, approaching Battleship Row, and one of them launches a torpedo, and 2 guys who are on the outside of the ship, like cleaning it or watch it as it approaches the ship and hits.
The shot following the torpedo was actually kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. The torpedo seemed to go too slowly in the movie. I feel like it would have gone faster in real life.
It's probably moving faster than we think.
The shot of the island with all the planes coming in was really haunting.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
and I liked that a lot.
That is, after I watched this movie, I rewatched the trailer because I very clearly remember the trailer and also the music video for Faith Hill's "There You Be," which was like the basically equivalent of that song from Titanic by Celine Dion for this movie.
You're going to say Top Gun.
That too. Well, no, because it's not like Top Gun where they played the opening of that every 10 minutes.
Oh. Yeah, fair point.
But they do incorporate the the main theme from the movie into There You'll Be. But that shot of all the planes coming in, like seeing the island, is like the first shot of that trailer. So it's a very iconic shot, as is another shot that we'll get to not too far.
Yeah, Michael Bay movies are always good on the visual side, and this is no exception.
Yeah, so everyone wakes up from that. They get to their battle stations. Rafe and Danny are like wake up when they hear the explosion, and they all jump into the car. The photographer says that he's from like the Navy newsreel. Admiral Kimmel sees the planes going in, and then we get to probably the most iconic shot from this movie, where the Japanese bomber has the little like card of the Arizona. He's looking through his scope. And then we see him launch it, and we follow the bomb as it goes down into the Arizona and hits the deck, pierces through the deck, hits the munitions storage.
That's right. It doesn't detonate right away, though. One of Doris Miller's friends is there, and he sees it right before he dies, which is
and it just
sad.
explodes, and it's a huge explosion.
Right.
So the photographer, whose name I really am surprised that he does not have a name.
I'm not. There are already so many other characters.
He's like taking footage. They get over to the airfield, and it's only at this point that Evelyn wakes up. And they see all the devastation. They're like, all right, we need to get moving.
They did show a very high lack of readiness, like a surprising lack of naval readiness. And I know that exposition was supposed to be there, but are we really ever that unprepared? prepared. Like people were just like
Wow.
chilling, reading the newspaper.
Wow. From Tora, we actually see, and which was supposed to be a pretty accurate depiction of what's happening. Like people on a Sunday, people are gone, or like on a weekend, no one's there. Like people gone home at noon. So in a way, yes.
It seems pretty authentic. Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So Red, the stutterer, is trying to wake up everyone else. He's up. He sees the planes out the window. His stutter is interfering with him, trying to wake up everyone, saying that the Japanese are here.
So do you think this was supposed to be funny, this scene?
Slightly. Or just slightly dramatic irony.
Yeah, it could be that too.
This is when Doris Miller finds his captain who's been heavily injured. He's giving me instructions, make sure that my XO knows that he's in command now. And then he's giving all these other instructions. And he's like, and Doris Miller is just like, you trained us well. Everyone's where they need to be. And then the captain dies.
If this were Star Trek, you would have been like, Doris Miller, you're in charge now. The Enterprise is yours.
But no, this is real. Well, a version of real life, and they follow the chain of command.
Yep.
You see some planes that are shooting up the hospital, and they're firing on the nurses who are trying to get to their station.
I'm so impressed with. I think this is much more of a waving the flag moment than the shot of the kids in the baseball scene when everyone starts running to their stations.
Mm-hmm.
They're running straight into danger, literally through gunfire. People are dying on the way. Both, men in uniform and the nurses are running. We're watching people die, try to protect everybody else. Ben Affleck, who as a character almost died in a very similar situation and is just itching to get back on a plane. And that's why America's the best.
You're stealing words from Alec Guinness, or I keep saying Alec Guinness, Alec Baldwin later in the movie.
Yeah, the love triangle is almost completely forgotten about.
Which is good. I'm glad, because in this moment, all of that falls away.
Yeah.
And it should. You're in the middle of a war. You're not going to be worrying about that. Hopefully. If you are, then you're just really petty and you should not be there.
What, really petty? Worried about the love of your life dying in the middle of a war? I think they could have played it off so that it's not.
You
petty.
Want more romance, Zach?
No, I'm not saying that I wanted it. I'm just surprised that it wasn't
Could
there.
have.
Yeah.
I appreciated that the focus was on rallying around the flag. That felt appropriate. But you're right. They could have made poor choices.
So I was going to mention this later, but I guess I can mention it now, is something I think the reason why this movie is so derided is that it doesn't commit to being a love story or a war movie, if that makes sense. I think the title caused a lot of resentment because people went to Pearl Harbor expecting it to be a movie about Pearl Harbor, not the love triangle. If they had called it something else, and you went in expecting it to be about a love triangle that happened to be taking place during Pearl Harbor, I think it would have been much better received.
Well,
maybe a little better received.
This section of the movie feels like a Pearl Harbor movie. And they don't shy away from showing the destruction and the death and, our newspaper friend. We see him die on screen. And the battle sequence goes on for a really long time, much longer than I had expected even.
Pilots trying to get to their planes, but the Zeros blow up a lot of planes, and then finally Rafe and Danny arrive in the airfield. And this is also where we get Doris Miller gets his big moment. He sees someone getting on the guns who gets killed, and he jumps up on the guns, and it's clear that he has no training in using this gun because he's not firing in bursts. He's just pulling the hammer, keeping the hammer down, pulling that trigger. And he does end up shooting down one of the planes, though.
I would have liked a little bit more clarity that he wasn't trained on the gun.
You could tell from it.
He said, I should say.
I've never heard him fire a gun.
Scene.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
that
true.
I've never fired a gun.
Yeah. So he's just in this moment. This is he's stepping in to fill a need because he is a hero, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, during this scene is where we get a sighting of a dog on the West Virginia. And I'm like, oh no, this dog. Oh no, I am invested in this dog. Don't die, dog.
It's like the dog
Yeah,
from Independence Day.
So the nurses finally get into the hospital and they're trying to get the patients away from the windows. They like shelter them with the mattresses from the beds and as they get bombed. This scene, we go back to the airfield. One of our other characters, Billy, gets a bomb drops like right next to him, but it takes a while, doesn't blow up immediately, and he's like, "No, it's a dud," and then boom, he's gone.
Yeah, I think that would have hit a little bit harder if we didn't just have that happen on the Arizona with Dory's friend.
But we've known Billy a little bit better.
No, but I'm saying the shock that it's actually
tiny. Oh yeah, minuscule amount better. So we see that Oklahoma is turning over. It's starting to sink. There's a sailor who can't swim, which is not out of the ordinary at this time.
That's right.
And he's like saying, I can't swim, I can't swim. And this is where I would have sworn at least one of you had seen Titanic before, so I can start making these comparisons. Because this is where you get the heavy Titanic comparisons with like the ships turning over and people like sliding down the decks. It's very reminiscent of Titanic, but also probably of how a ship actually sinks.
I've been trying to really quickly think of a substantive comparison I've made that was like, yeah, that was a good comparison. Can't think of one.
Danny and Rafe get in the car. Apparently the airfield that Earl is at hasn't been hit yet. And so this is where I start to realize, these are supposed to be those two characters in Tora Tora who drive off the Haleiwa to get their planes in a car and go over to get themselves up in the air. So they drive over, and then we get some more shots of like sailors who are trapped in the ship. We get the American flag in the water. Hashtag not subtle at all.
Well, it's just interesting that it came out pre 9/11 because that's very reminiscent.
Right. I mean, I feel like if this movie had come out in the post 9/11 world, would have gotten a different reception. It maybe like, okay, now people would still deride it, but in that moment, it would probably been more critically acclaimed with all the patriotism that is just surging through this movie.
It's funny that you mention 9/11 again, because watching the sequence of events, the absolute destruction, it was kind of hard to watch. And it very much reminded me of the day of 9/11. There was screaming, there was jumping off things, there were brave men and women running towards danger. It felt reminiscent of an event that hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked so well for you.
Yeah, this part had... so I mentioned, I've had a whole host of feelings about this movie. I mentioned that they spent more time than I would have thought on the destruction. I guess makes sense in a movie called Pearl Harbor that a chunk of the film would be dedicated to the horror there. But it feels like it's whatever the opposite of romanticized is. Felt gritty and it felt meaningful. The fact I said that about a Michael Bay movie and the fact that I've said that about a movie that I've criticized so harshly for its anti-feminist stance, I'm like, felt things inside when I saw these people dying. Go America. It's what I was feeling at this point in the movie.
I mean,
Quite the contrast.
Yeah.
So FDR gets word about the attack happening, and they're like, "How bad is it?" And he's like, "It's still not over."
Right.
Hey guys, what's your favorite Churchill?
Nice callback.
Back to the hospital. Evelyn's kind of taking charge here. She saves a man by applying pressure to his neck wound because his artery, she basically puts her fingers in his artery to clog the bleed, to stop it. People keep at this point asking for doctors keep asking for hemostat. I was like, what is a hemostat? Apparently, it's a clamp to control bleeding. Danny and Ray finally get to the airfield with Earl, and everyone gets a bunch of guns. They hide in a a bunker of sorts, or not. What would that be, Zach? Not a bunker. Where they're hiding, with all the sandbags piled up.
Yeah, I think you just say they hide behind sandbags.
Okay, so they're hiding behind sandbags. Yeah, right. Because the planes are going past, and they're like, we don't want to draw attention to us yet because we aren't ready yet. Hide, and you can see Goose with this giant gun. And it looks like he's he's gonna fire. Actually, Carolyn, when he's watching, is like, she's definitely gonna fire there, and
I
give them
thought
all
so
away.
too. I thought so too.
You can
Carolyn
see it
hadn't
coming.
seen this movie either.
No, she'd seen it, but it's been a long time.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that you could take down a plane with rifles is pretty silly. I mean,
mean,
not to say it's never been done, but the way they do it in the movie doesn't seem so plausible.
some Zeros come to shoot up the field, and they hit a bunch of the planes. The photographer gets shot, but his camera, newsreel footage, or camera is still going, and it actually goes to him like dead in front of it. It's like, whoa, that's dark.
Mhm.
But Danny and Ray finally get into the planes, and then there's another pilot, because there's 4 planes that are able to go up. The Japanese shoot up one of them, and Danny and Rafe and Joe get into other planes. And I'm like, who's Joe? We've never met Joe before. Oh no! And Carolyn's like, oh, he's definitely gonna die. So Joe goes first.
yeah. So the 3 of them were going to go up in the air, and because there are 2 characters that we care deeply about, and a third,
And one red shirt. Yeah.
very clearly a red shirt, and you're like, oh well, wah, wah. He's definitely going to die. And the fact that he goes first.
Right.
Yeah.
The fact that he's named Joe made me wonder, was he just one of the crew before this and I just wasn't paying attention?
No. I remember most of the other pilots. He's not one of them.
Maybe it was a deleted scene. When there's stuff like that, that's what I usually put it down to.
Or he's just the red shirt.
Vincent Recchi.
Yeah. So finally get into the air. And so it's like them versus a bunch of Zeros. They split them up.
When the 2 of them are getting into the plane, like I said before, I'm really into the real cheesy bromance. And they were like, I got you. And the other one was like, I got you. And I I enjoyed that.
This is
That's
where
great.
the bromance works here, where despite everything else that's going on between the 2 of them, they're still wingmen, and they're still going to support each other and help each other.
Yeah, there's tons of Star Wars style dialogue here. Like we got Danny, I got 3 on my 6. I can't shake him. He literally says, I can't shake him. And then here come the subtitles again. Someone says, it's a long son of a gun. And someone else says, let's get this backstabber.
Yeah, well, I prefer those than the racial slurs they keep throwing at the Japanese.
That's right.
So they split them up. Rafe shouts over the radio to Earl, get the guns in the tower. And so they're getting them up. And then Danny and Rafe play chicken, call back to the beginning. And they take down, so they, go as pretty much as close as they can before they turn, which takes out 3 of those planes. And then
I love the chicken that they played in the air, the callback, the scene, the coordinated effort. I love that. And this is going to sound
look great here. Yeah.
Yeah, and the not to military nerd out too much, but the coordinated effort and the strategy and the tactics, that's what makes our military the best. # not sponsored.
They bring a bunch of the Zeros past the control tower where Earl has finally got him and Red and Goose up in there. So they lure the planes past the tower. They take down one of the planes that way. And then they head over to Battleship Row. And at this point, this sounds like Pirates of the Caribbean music. The
music definitely did get more jovial, is the first word that comes to mind, but it's probably not an appropriate word. From death to we can do it, but in music form.
I think they take out a few planes there, and there's one guy in the water who's shouting out, P-40s, yeah! I distinctly remember that from even the first or second time I saw this movie.
Yeah,
which I don't think I said at the top. I saw this movie twice in theaters.
You did not say that at the top.
And I've seen it a number of times on DVD, Blu-ray, etc.
Yeah, that part's very Michael Bay. It seemed like something out of Transformers. I know that you that's not meant as a dig. It seems like the kind of thing they would do.
It seemed like something I would do on my couch. Hey.
Yeah, America.
America.
So we go back to Japanese fleet where Colonel Fuchida reports that there's been a successful attack, but cancels the 3rd wave, which again is back to Tora. We don't get an explanation here, but it's because he doesn't want to risk too much and figures that this is a good time to withdraw. Rafe and Danny land back at the airfield. There's a really cheesy but works for me part where Earl is like, "Who taught you how to fly?" to Danny. He's like, he did. And then Rafe has the very dramatic posing when he's coming out of his plane. I was like, oh, Michael
hero
Bay is
pose.
finest.
Well, this actually reminds me of that part in the Age of Heroes where someone says, "Who taught you how to shoot?"
yeah.
He said, "You did, drill sergeant," and everyone makes fun of him.
But this is not making fun of. This is pure hero pose. Like, oh, America. Rafe and Danny's heroic movement is over, but this is where really Evelyn actually gets something to do here. This worked for me a lot. They don't have anything to mark with, so she's like thinking of things of what to use. So she grabs her lipstick and use it to mark like who's had morphine and who hasn't had morphine.
The M on the forehead thing, they also do that in Band of Brothers, but they use the guy's blood to do it. So, as much as we love Evelyn, she didn't come up with the idea of putting an M on someone's forehead.
They ran out of tourniquets, but someone needs a tourniquet. She takes off her stocking and gives it to the doctors to use this. And they send her out to do triage. And like Mark, basically only send in people who can be saved. She has to make that judgment call. Like, if they're too far gone, don't even bother sending them in. Yeah, which is hard.
That's rough. That's hard.
Yeah, there's a part here where someone comes up to Evelyn and she's like, "Am I going to be okay? Am I going to die?" She's like, "Don't worry, you'll be fine." And then she walks away and says, "He's not going to make it." Was that supposed to be funny?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so, but the way it was like timed.
I don't think it was timed. I think it was more.
I don't think so.
It's trying to be humorous at all. I think it was trying to be just like serious and like, all right, yes, we're telling you something, but the reality is you're going to die.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to show her caring for everybody in the way that she could. Because I think if it's the same patient I'm thinking of, she said to somebody else, give him morphine and make him comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have enough. She says, I think the line is like, do you have enough morphine to make him comfortable? Because he's not going to make it.
Oh, yeah, there we go. This is also the part with the Asian doctor, which was actually one of my favorite parts in the movie. Because so what happens is one of the soldiers is like, I don't repeat exactly what he says, but he says something very hostile to this Asian doctor because he thinks he's Japanese. So what I liked about it was it felt very real. It felt like the kind of thing that really would have happened at the time.
Yeah.
And it was subtle in a way that Michael Bay movies almost never are.
Okay.
Fair. I like that.
Like the part in Tora with the messenger delivery boy, it was a hint of things to come and foreshadowing for the real world, but it wasn't like a big dramatic moment. It was very fast, and then you move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Someone is bringing bodies to Evelyn, and she says, "I just found her, and it's Betty, Red's fiance." And she like, well, actually, she even before she knows it's Betty, she's automatically says, "No, she's already dead." And then like they make the dramatic reveal that it's Betty, and then Jennifer Gardner's there too, and is like, "No, you sure? Double check? No, she's dead. We need to keep moving." And this is where like Jennifer Garner has her like slightly, like probably the most dramatic part of her performance where she's like drops and is like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, she was freaking out a little bit earlier too, but she continues to freak out here.
Yeah. So we go back over to Battleship Row where it's completely devastated. They're trying to save anyone who's left. Also, we find out that the dog is alive. I was so invested in it. Like, when you just see the dog swimming up and goes back to his owners, oh, the dog's alive. Yay.
I like that they showed that the dog made at the end.
There we go. Tying back. So, running theme of these movies for you, Sarah, is we're dog movies. First Sergeant Stubby, now this. Dogs and war. There you go.
Dogs and war. And feminist propaganda.
So Admiral Kimmel finally gets a message that says, attacked by Japan and considered imminent. And it's like, well, they're only an hour late.
Yeah, very ironic.
And there's a scene where Doris Miller is on one of the boats and he sees the flag of the Arizona and like fishes it out of the water, which made me think, wait, he wasn't on the Arizona, right? He was on the West Virginia.
Yeah,
earlier, I thought he was on the Arizona. So, because of the way that the editing happened, I thought he was on the Arizona.
And then it was unclear.
I was confused after because we saw him after.
So, part of your confusion is probably because a lot of the battleships use the same ship for filming. They just swapped out like the life preservers with the names on them, so it's hard to tell them apart. But of course, they're all also going to be exactly the same because they're all battleships.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so he fishes the Arizona's flag out of the water and like holds it tight, which I guess is more for like not because he was on that ship, but because of all the souls that were lost on that ship. Anyways, we go back to Admiral Yamamoto with the Japanese fleet. This is where we get his sleeping giant quote, which probably never happened.
Yeah, you probably never actually said it.
We go back to Evelyn, who's exhausted. She's working so hard, and Danny and Rafe come to give, say, what can we do? It's like, we need blood, so they give their blood in Coke bottles. As they're doing this, they see a priest giving last rites to a bunch of soldiers who are dying.
Mm-hmm.
A soldier run in and say, there are men trapped in the harbor. We need every man who can stand.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to cut through this scene.
Yeah, this one was rough.
Oh,
Like they're trying to cut through the hull, but the cutters aren't working fast enough. They're reaching out through. You only see their hands reaching out through the hole that they've cut so far. Danny and Rafe are like holding their hands as the water is rising, and then the hands stop reaching back.
that was
Wow!
that was
really
hard
rough.
to watch. How would you make me watch that?
I mean,
That was hard.
I remember how I felt when I saw that the first time in the theaters, and I mean, it loses none of its impact actually. Even though I've
not
seen
only
it
do you,
probably upward of 10
see-
times.
not only do you see them drown, you see just the hands, and they're holding each other's hands
Mhm.
as they drown. Like, oh, that's all I got
So-
to say.
We can deride Michael Bay for his storytelling a lot of times, but he works in other places. Like here, he works.
Yeah.
So FDR now makes his big speech, date that will live in infamy, which
3,000 people died, which is similar to 9/11. That's another weird coincidence too.
right, it's also overcut with scenes of the devastation at Pearl Harbor, and then he asked Congress to declare a state of war. And we next go to FDR meeting with a bunch of his staff. Apparently, there are men still trapped inside the Arizona because they can hear tapping from the outside of it, which is wow, and was a true thing. Yeah,
Yep, that's right.
so they're starting to try to plan attacks against Japan, and basically whoever his person from the Navy there is saying it can't be done. And he does this dramatic thing of standing and don't tell me what cannot be done. Yes.
And at this point, I'm like, okay, the movie needs to end now.
Did you look at the clock and see there's an hour left?
Yeah, and I was like,
Yes,
are you
that was-
kidding me?
That was kind of the funny thing. I have a similar, it felt like this is Act 3, this is the big battle scene, our heroes are heroes, and I had assumed that the movie would come to a close, and then they go and make their medals, and I thought, okay, this is the last scene. And then it did, in fact, keep going.
We get another newsreel about everything going on in the Pacific, everywhere else, and all sorts of fighting. And then FDR hears an idea of how to bomb Tokyo from a sub-commander. And then we go to like a hangar that's full of coffins draped with American flags. We see Red kneeling down beside Betty's coffin, which got me. I was like, oh God, they were engaged. They were going to wait 2 years till she was 19 to get married. Oh, I mean, it got me. Also got me Doris Miller visiting his captain's casket, giving it a salute.
Yep.
Yeah, the salute.
Rafe and Danny are pulled aside. They are told they're going to need to go to the mainland, and they're like, "What's this about?" Is that you can ask Colonel Doolittle when you see him. We're back to the relationship drama. So this is when Evelyn reveals to Rafe that she's pregnant, but the Danny doesn't know. He said, "Don't tell him. I want him focused on this mission so that he's not distracted by anything else."
So this is what I was getting at, where the movie doesn't chicken out and have her be like, I don't know which of you to choose. And then they leave and one of them dies and then makes the choice for her. Though Sarah's point that pregnancy makes the choice for her instead is a good one.
I
don't think that was her point. Well, actually, what was your point?
Was it, Sarah?
Yeah, so my point, was that's interesting. I didn't even think of that. My point was it will spoil what I'm sure Christian will get to, which is kind of the last possibly quote of the movie. It's the two men that decide for her who she should be with and who should raise her child. So not only does, spoiler alert for like 10 minutes from now, not only does one of them, the one that she kind of picked, Denny, not only does he die, then, shrug emoji, I guess she'll go with the other one. And then it's decided seemingly for her that Ben Affleck will be the father of her child. Like, it's the two men who decide her fate, more or less.
Yeah.
So it's in part, partly because of, their admittedly very Jesus-like heroic actions, like literally on cross.
We'll I have thoughts about that too. Yeah.
The only thing I would add was that she does say that she still loves Rafe.
Right.
Sure.
She just knows that she can't be with both of them. So she has to pick one.
I mean, they could thruple it.
Not in the 1940s. What are you? Do you think he is William Martin Wollstone or whatever his name is? The guy who created Wonder Woman?
I did kind of think that they didn't have her make even a hardcore choice. Because she could have said, look, I love Danny, peace. But they kind of did what was kind, which was they had her, like, she could have her cake and eat it too. So for the audience, kind of no matter who you wanted her to end up with, I think you can come away kind of happy because she confesses her love to Rafe, but picks Danny. So I think the goal there was to kind of have everyone be satisfied. So I didn't think that she did a whole lot of picking, I guess.
Yeah, I guess when you put it that way, they did kind of chicken out a little bit by not having her be like, okay, here we go, final decision. I pick one of you and the other one, have a nice life. We get the impression that she was going to do that, but never actually gets there. Because like you said, the decision was made for her.
But before we get to that decision, let's talk about the raid.
Yeah, I was like, are they really going to do the whole raid? And then they do.
So we get Rafe and Danny meeting with Colonel Doolittle, aka Alec Baldwin. You got the name right this time. Mentions that he heard reports of them fighting against the Japanese in their hula shirts.
I did like the reference to hula, quote unquote hula shirts, which was kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. Says he's putting together a top secret mission, which of course made me think of Mission Impossible because he's in the last two and he's like the secretary, so he's giving out missions. I was like, okay, interesting foreshadowing.
Right, as well as every other spy movie.
Cut to I don't know how many months later. Like, we don't know when this. I would presume that the funeral with all the caskets happened not long after. So 3 months later, on March 3rd, 1942, we get Colonel Doolittle assembling his entire team, and the classic look around you at the person next to you. There's a fair chance that you or he will be dead.
That's right.
If there's any man who's willing to race those odds, step forward. And they all step forward.
Yeah, something I should point out here is that it's the rest of the crew. It's like Michael Shannon,
yes, yeah.
and Red, and the other guy. So it's like all of their buddies are all on this mission, which is kind of dumb, but whatever. At this point, I was willing to let it go.
So I did like the shot of the feet moving forward, like the close-up on all the feet. I thought that was kind of a cool shot. In that moment, I actually kind of thought that because our two boys had talked to each other and Ben Affleck basically said, you should stay back.
Yes,
because there's a good
Evelyn's
chance
already
that
lost the man she loved. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that he had successfully convinced him. So I actually expected there to be one pair of boots back. I was wrong.
No, Danny's a hero. He wouldn't.
I mean, yes, I understand. But there's also something heroic about being with a woman you love. He's
going to give up his bro and his dream and everything for her. I mean, it's certainly a very different ending of the movie. That would have been an interesting way to take the story.
That's what I thought was going to happen, was that he was going to... and if he had made that choice, going back to kind of what we were talking about a minute ago, the two men are making the choice for Evelyn. One of those choices is both of them stepping forward.
They're not told what the mission is. They're just told that they have to train to get these B-25s to take off in 467 feet. And they're going to learn how to fly them like a fighter, 30 feet off the ground. And so start pulling off inessential parts, armor plating, etc.
Yeah. I have something here. There's a part where they say, this is Lieutenant Jack Richards, and he's going to teach you how to do it.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, I presume that he's a real person.
Probably.
But he's in the movie for literally like 3 seconds, and then you never see him again. He never talks again.
No, he's the one who's telling them to, like, all the stuff they're taking out.
You could have just had Alec Baldwin do it.
I think it's because, like, this is one of the few times where they're like, all right, there's a real person who did this. Oh, I mean, Alec Baldwin was also a real person. So, like, just have that. I was curious. All right, 467 feet. There are 5,280 feet in a mile. So that's less than a tenth of the So they say that, or
Mhm.
Alec Baldwin says, your grandmother can take off a B-25 in a mile-long runway. It's like, all right, that's pretty damn impressive in less than a tenth of the usual space that you get to take off in that.
I liked how nobody could do it, and then he's like, you know what, I'm going to show you guys how to do it, and then he goes and does it.
Yep. And we next go to the USS Hornet, where they finally get their orders. They're going to bomb Tokyo, and then they give the very important note of, is it even possible to land a B-25 on a carrier? And they said no, but that's irrelevant because we're not landing back on the carriers. As soon as we take off, they're going to go back, and we're going to land in China.
Well, more like bail out in China.
Yeah.
I don't think they were
the
intending on
plan was to
landing.
land in China. There are homing beacons that they were supposed to activate.
They say the purpose of this is to make America believe again, or like recover.
Alec Baldwin has the line about, when they hit us at Pearl, it was a sledgehammer. But, what we're doing here will be a pinprick. But it'll be a pinprick right through their hearts.
For those on pod, Zach just made like a...
This is just like an
emoji.
exaggerated frog. It's like, if you say so, buddy, I suppose. So the next scene is my favorite part of the movie. It's just so funny.
Okay.
I'm so excited.
Describe it?
What is the next scene?
I'll make sure if you're the right scene. Yeah.
Yeah, Evelyn goes to see Major Jackson at Major Jackson's house, and you can tell it's Major Jackson's house or office or whatever, because there's
his
a
office.
sign that says Major Jackson. And
I
she
didn't
walks
notice
up to him and she says, "Are you Major Jackson?" And he says, "Yes, I am." So we know for 100% certainty that this guy is in fact Major Jackson.
I do not remember his name or that there was a sign that said Major Jackson.
I remember that scene, but I did not remember his name.
Okay, well, I guess they repeated enough that if you didn't get his name, that's on you.
Oh,
Fair.
I mean, it's okay. You have to just remember what's important.
Anyway, so Major Jackson is the soldier whose neck artery she plugged. And it just so happens that Major Jackson works in the command center. She says, "I want to be in the command center when news comes in about the Doolittle raid." And he's like, "You shouldn't even know this. What, some hotshot pilot mouthed off to you?"
Pretty much.
She even says, actually, it's two pilots I'm concerned about. We go back to the USS Hornet. Apparently, there's the runways 3 feet shorter than what they practice on. Goose got some victory cigars, and then we get Alec Baldwin watching Rafe and Danny. Is like, we might lose this battle, but we're going to win this war. You know why? Because of them.
Yeah, it's just one speech after another is what I have. 2 speeches in a row.
I don't know. I like this. I thought it worked. So next we get a briefing scene with Doolittle, and Doolittle says, his superiors didn't want him to come with him, is disobeying his orders and going with them. Over the radio, we hear Radio Tokyo. The person on the radio says, "Watch out, the enemy will get you."
Oh yeah, that's Tokyo Rose. Which is from real life, yeah.
And then the USS Hornet gets spotted by Japanese ships.
Yeah, I thought they were fighting them.
Not yet. They were just going to general quarters. They are 624 miles out. They were supposed to launch at 400 miles out. So he turns to the other guy whose name I don't remember, but you were like, "We never hear him talk again." Yes, he talks here.
Oh, Jack Richards? Okay,
Yeah.
fine. He talks here.
He says he's doing the math. I don't know. Launch now and have enough fuel to reach China. But he's like, but otherwise, what's the other alternative? We launch now. So they strip the planes even further. They take out some of the tail guns, put in broomsticks that were painted black to at least look like they have something back there.
Yeah, I have in this part so much yelling. It's just people yelling all the time.
So they launch the planes. I think Alec Baldwin and his co-pilot are first. I like the scene where he's like, "When did you find religion?" He's like, "When you assigned me to this mission, sir."
With Doolittle, so earlier in the briefing, somebody asked him what he would do if he had to land.
Right. That's it.
If he had to land in Japan, he said he would basically
find the biggest, sweetest military target, tell my crew to bail out, and I would take the plane down.
So I thought, somebody's going to have to make that decision. Doolittle's going to die heroically. So one of the main characters is going to have to crash land in Japan and make that same call. Because Doolittle says, "I'm an old man. You guys are young."
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You might not want to make that call. And I was like, one of them is going to have to make that call.
Nope.
I mean, not directly.
No.
Yeah, they do get
something else.
Adjacent.
They have to make a different call. We go to FDR making a radio speech, a very patriotic speech. People say that we're a nation of playboys and whatever, and we get everyone has to fight our wars for us, but tell that to the boys of the Pacific. Tell that to people in the men in the flying fortresses. Tell that to the Marines.
Would have been nice to have seen some Marines when he said that, but okay.
Yeah, but also the thing I noticed here on his desk, he has like a pin cushion, which is like Hitler bending over, and the like pin cushion is Hitler's butt.
Yeah, that seems a little unprofessional for the president, but whatever.
They're flying the planes. They see the coastline. They start flying over the targets, and we have Evelyn getting snuck into the command center by Major Jackson. Sit here. Don't talk to the other typists. They won't talk to you. Whose job is she actually doing? And like who? And like what about all this other stuff that should have been like the work that she's supposed to be doing? Who's gonna pick up that slack?
Maybe that station was someone who's on vacation.
Yeah. Anyways,
that was a joke, by the way. Obviously, you're not going to go on vacation like while they're planning this Doolittle raid.
Yeah, but she also I have in my notes slowest typing ever. She's clearly not used to typing anything at all. So she's like with her 2 pointer fingers like type. Anyway, so back to the Doolittle raid. They have the target in sight. They start launching the bombs. We see factories and buildings exploding. Yes?
Japanese planes are attacking them, and they shoot back with real guns. Yes. And I was kind of like, would this be a good opportunity to bring back the broomsticks? Because they're like, we can't shoot back because we have broomsticks instead.
Well, I mean, there are a number of different guns on that plane, so they just took one of the guns out.
They did a reference to the broomsticks, I thought, at some point.
They did.
I was waiting for them to. I didn't think they did.
I mean,
maybe I missed it.
It wasn't at this point. No, there's nothing here. It was before.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we get the anti-aircraft guns firing. I don't think we have other planes. They're just getting shot at by anti-aircraft guns.
Well, I guess that would make sense because they have to escape, and they wouldn't be able to escape other planes.
Yeah, and there's flak everywhere. They say split up, get into the clouds, and Evelyn's overhearing all of this on the radio, and it gets closer to the door where the radio is coming out of, and they close the door dramatically. You can see Major Jackson's face does not look good.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a shot of a temple in Japan where women are there and seeing flying over. Filmed, actually not Byodo-in Temple in Japan, actually filmed at a replica of the Byodo-in Temple in Hawaii, which Carolyn and I visited when we went recently. And Sarah, you should definitely go and check this out. It's really cool.
Yeah, I would definitely like to. And I did at least recognize it. In the movie.
From the photos we sent.
Yeah.
So they get into the clouds. My notes, it's definitely autocorrect because it says Thor's dead, but I'm pretty sure that was supposed to be Theo.
Oh. Okay.
Who's the other guy.
I remember Theo now.
Yeah.
He dies in the plane.
Mm-hmm. And then we see FDR gardening, and then he gets word about the Doolittle raid. They launched 12 hours and they were supposed to, and the homing beacons that they were supposed to get, go to China to show them the safe landing spots on a ship that crashed en route. So they have no homing beacons either. So they're running out of fuel. They're basically on fumes. But finally, they see the coast of China. So Rafe and Danny are to break off together, and they're gliding in. They're dead stick, which means they can't control it at all. So they're just bracing for impact at this point. And then Rafe's plane crashes down there. He warns off Danny, saying, "Japanese patrols down there in China. Don't come here." And they get pinned down by one of these patrols after they crash.
I like that they're using pistols.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's pretty much what they would have on there, unless they pulled off one of the guns.
No, I know. I just like that it's so different. You don't see it too much.
Yeah, they get pinned down. Danny's plane flies over and does a strafing run and saves them from that patrol, but then lands elsewhere and crashes in a big explosion.
It looks like it's completely destroyed, and there's no way anyone could survive it. But of course, everyone.
Danny's injured. Goose is alive, but Danny's injured. He's got a piece of metal in his neck. Rafe, of course, runs over. Brad's trying to stop and say, "No, there's patrols everywhere," and he does this impressive run where he runs
through gunfire, right?
Yeah, through gunfire, he shoots the Japanese soldiers as they just pop out from the rice paddies.
It's very action movie.
Yeah, and gets to Danny.
By bromance love.
Yeah. That's the true romance here.
Yeah. He sees that Danny's got, a thing in his neck and is like trying to pull it out. But as this is happening, they get snuck on by another patrol. Patrol gets a drop on them. They tie Danny to a piece of wood. I don't remember what it was, actually. Carolyn told me what it was. I was like, but I do not remember what it is.
That's a name? Okay.
Yeah. Well, the way it was shaped, it was actually a recognizable piece
Jesus
of
wood?
something. Yeah. Yeah. It looks like, I even made the joke. So what, are they going
Jesus
to
wood, yeah.
crucify him now? Rafe grabs a gun from one of the dead pilots, uses it to shoot the other shoot a bunch of the Japanese soldiers, but then runs out of bullets and is about to get shot. When Danny jumps in front of him and takes the bullets, other people get the drop on the other soldiers, but Danny is shot.
This point doesn't really matter,
Yep.
but I thought that Danny didn't just use his body as a shield. I thought he actually sort of jumped into the guy who was shooting and got shot by a third party.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Oh yeah, that's what it. Yes, that's what it was. Yes. So
Yeah,
the person who was
basically he saves his bro.
Yeah, I like that a little bit better because A, it's slightly less cliche, and B, I think it's
not
technically
jumping in front of the. Yeah,
right.
You're right.
So
No, it's not just him
makes
jumping in front of the bullets, right? Yeah,
right.
it's him taking out the guy, but then other soldiers shoot him.
Yeah,
and you see the
it has
bullets
same
go
outcome,
through
but-
him. So they're like, oh, there's no way he's walking away from this. So as Danny's dying, Rafe is like, no, you've got to make it, Danny. You're gonna be a father. And he's like, no, you are. And then Danny dies. Basically, 5 minutes too late, the Chinese arrived and they managed to get out of there.
It's weird seeing the Chinese as the good guys, huh? Aside from Pacific Rim.
Yeah.
I like how they have an American flag too.
To show that they're with
you don't get it.
So back in Hawaii, you see Evelyn's there waiting for everyone to get back. You see a bunch of other families too. Evelyn sees Rafe, but he has that "this is not good" look on his face. And as he steps out, he's pulling the coffin, which is somehow Evelyn knows it's Danny's.
It hadn't occurred to me until Sarah said it that she did lose each of them once.
Mm-hmm.
One time for fake, one time for real. And it would have been interesting to have her see some kind of reaction, at the very least, say something like, not again. I can't lose him again. Right? I don't know.
I'm sure they did cut to her face looking upset.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted it to be bigger. It's a Michael Bay movie. Make it big. Big explosions, big emotions, all that stuff.
Yeah.
This is also completely a stupid point, but here we go. I've started talking. I'll finish it. When Ben Affleck brings the coffin out, he brings out one coffin very dramatically. And for cinematic storytelling reasons, obviously it makes sense. We bring out exactly one coffin. Of course, there were multiple people from their squad who didn't make it, who
Theo,
you think would also.
for one.
Yeah.
And there's even a random other guy who they're like, where's so-and-so? Oh, they're dead. It's like, who's that? Don't remember who that is.
I thought in the moment as, Ben Affleck is coming down the stairs, and instead of pulling out a coffin, I thought what was going to happen was, and maybe this is just what I would have done from a writing perspective, headcanon, is that he just closes the stairs behind him. As though no more people are going to come out. So rather than actually bring out the coffin, I thought he was going to walk down the stairs and then close the stairs and then see Evelyn's face just sort of sunken and looking
drop. Yeah. Well, that works too. I mean, I think both work.
I mean, they both work. They both work. I just for some reason thought that would happen. Hey, Hollywood, call me.
I mean, I like Sarah's version better because I like subtlety, like the part with the doctor that I mentioned before. But of course,
as I said, Michael Bay film.
Yeah, I was about to say that. It's a Michael Bay movie, so it's going to be on the nose as much as possible.
We cut to everyone getting medals. So all the nurses are getting medals. Actually, so it looks like they're getting Purple Hearts, but I don't think any of them got injured.
It's probably safe to say they got hit by some debris.
Fair.
Doris Miller getting his medal. We get voiceover from Evelyn about how he's the first to get the Navy Cross. First African American to get the Navy Cross.
First of many.
I would have liked it if she had said something like, he got his Navy Cross and he got the respect he always wanted. Like the callback.
I mean, do we know that he did, though? I don't know.
Well, maybe she could have said something like, I hope he felt he got the respect he wanted.
Well, I feel like in this point, she's not acting as Evelyn. She's just like as a narrator, basically. It's not like her perspective, but just as an overall narrator.
Right, but the overall narrator would know that too, because they know everything about him.
I mean, it's more of an omniscient narrator than necessarily character narrator kind of thing. I don't know. We also see Rafe getting a medal from FDR, and like Doolittle's there's a "That's for all the Raiders." And then we go to shots of the Arizona, the real life Arizona, which is still underwater. Then we go back to Tennessee, where we see a little kid playing around, and he sees at the base of a memorial to Danny. See Rafe and Evelyn, and presumably this is Danny's kid, who we find out is also named Danny.
Danny Jr.
Yeah, right. Rafe takes Danny flying.
In the
He's
same
got the
crop
most
duster.
adorable little aviator cap and goggles. Yes, in the same crop duster. And then with that, Faith Hill's There You'll Be. I watched that music video immediately after, which is interesting because it was directed by Michael Bay, and it actually used a lot of the same sets as the movie. And there's even a scene of her like in the parachute hangar as it intercuts with them making love in the parachute hangar.
Oh, the same parachute hanger? Oh,
Yeah,
my goodness.
yeah. With that is the end of the movie. So shall we go to our spy fact versus fiction? Zach?
Sure, I can start. So my sources are Wikipedia and the Cynical Historian, which is similar to History Buffs where he does movies. Okay, so first of all, active duty American airmen, which Rafe was, could not go and fight with the RAF during the Battle of Britain.
Yep.
But civilians could.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The Battle of Britain had already ended in October 1940, whereas the film has it happening in early 1941, as the dogfights were depicted. None of the Eagle squadrons saw action before 1941. The scene where the Japanese target the hospital is not true. They did not target it. It was damaged in the attack, and only one member of the medical staff was killed, but while he was on his way to report for duty. Doris Miller stayed a cook. He went on a war bonds tour, but then was killed in action when the carrier he was on was sank. So then a lot of the mistakes were like kind of small things that only ZJ would care about. So like, for example, the crop duster was a year too early. That type of crop duster does not exist. In the part where Germany's invading all these countries, the newsreel,
show
the tank
stuff from that didn't happen yet.
Well, no, it's an American tank in the newsreel.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah. The surfboard was invented in 1935. So before Michael Shannon did.
Well, the surfboard fin, not just the surfboard.
Okay, thank you. There were Marlboro cigarettes came out in the 70s where they're in the movie. A lot of the ships were wrong. Like there was 4 destroyers that were also from the 1970s. But let me look for the really good stuff. So the Doolittle Raiders did launch on the USS Hornet after being spotted by a single patrol boat. Mm-hmm. They didn't get into a fight. And they didn't do nearly as much damage as the movie made it appear. Also, no bodies were sent home immediately. They were interned in China for the duration of the war.
Okay.
The Queen Mary was used as a troop ship during the war.
So it would not have been docked in New York Harbor.
Well, it might have been, but either way, there wouldn't be fancy people in tuxedos on it.
Right.
Or those sparkling bulbs.
Yeah, the Mythbusters already did bullets traveling through the water. They were not, they didn't work that way. And then finally, all the stuff about FDR is kind of wrong. Like, he wasn't surprised out being told there was an attack. He didn't do the thing where he stood up and talked to his staff. Mm-hmm. And the generals didn't say it was impossible. They were convincing him to do it. It being the Doolittle Raid. So that is it for my spy fact.
I've got a few other things. Well, you mentioned the thing about the surfboard fin, which is what I was going to say. So Danny mentioned at one point that the Hawaiian name for Pearl Harbor is Waimomi, which means water of pearls. That is true. I was surprised that they actually got something right in there regarding like actual Hawaiian culture. This is according to IMDb. Apparently in camera shots during the Doolittle Raid where it appears that the actors are actually flying the planes, they actually are. And there wasn't like CGI intercuts. So what would happen is an actual pilot would bring them, would fly the plane over where it needed to be, and then they would get the other camera plane in position, and they would briefly give the yoke over to Ben Affleck, Alec Baldwin, and Josh Hartnett. So they at least had enough flight training so they could keep it steady, and then once the shot was done, they would give control back to the actual pilots. Lastly, this is fun for a little bit of something that we've covered in the past and a movie that we're going to cover in the future. So we have 2 Jack Ryans in this movie. Ben Affleck and Alec Baldwin.
Oh, that's true.
And
Alec
Ben
Guinness,
Affleck,
you wanted to say Alec Guinness one more time?
Yeah. Ben Affleck was on the set of Pearl Harbor when he was offered the role of Jack Ryan, and his co-star Alec Baldwin persuaded Affleck to take the role. And there's even a line in the movie where Alec Baldwin says, "You remind me of myself some 20 years ago."
Oh, I assume that's coincidence, though.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin's like, let's put that in. I don't think so.
So,
I actually have some spy fact versus spy fiction.
All right. Yes, go for it, Sarah.
As a veteran of the pod, I knew this section was coming. So I did some research, and I have 4 very quick things.
Okay.
First, because as soon as I saw after the movie, I was like, I have to know how much is real. Like, I have to know immediately. So they did have the 1 hour warning, and they did think that it was planes coming in from the mainland. Sounds like you covered that last week.
Mm-hmm.
On the Arizona, there were so many brothers who died on the Arizona that the military afterwards tried to stop the practice of placing blood relatives on the same ship. And I think that practice was in place for a little while, and then I don't think it's in place anymore, question mark? I'm not sure.
Oh, no.
But it was because of the devastation to families on Arizona that sort of policy change was considered, at least. A date that will live in infamy is, of course, legit, but as originally written, the line was a date that will live in world history. And FDR actually scratched it out and wrote infamy, like scribbled above it. So I thought that was kind of a neat, fun fact.
Yeah, that's a lot better.
A lot better. And that attack on Japan that at the end of the movie and that Zach had just talked about did happen. I wanted to know, but couldn't find out how many miles offshore they were when they took off.
When they actually launched,
yes. I wanted to know, yeah. So I don't know how many miles offshore they were.
I have that information somewhere. Hold on.
Nice. They did take the trip from Japan to China. As they said in the movie, there were 16 planes. That was accurate. And unlike the dramatized ending, 15 did make it to China, and 1 crash landed in the Soviet Union. But I don't believe anybody died. So
in the movie, they say it's 624 miles off the coast.
Yeah.
It was actually 650 miles off the coast.
Oh, damn!
So it was even more. Yeah, I don't know why they changed that of all things. Oh, so I do have another thing for spy fact versus fiction. So the control tower that Goose and Earl get up into when they're shooting at the plane. So for a long time, it is still there, but it was a long time, it was badly damaged and needed refurbishment. But as of July, you can actually start to go up into it and visit because they got funding to restore it.
Nice.
Yeah, and so it is right next to the Pacific Aviation Museum, which is one of my favorite museums in Hawaii. Of course, Bishop Museum is also great there. But if you want the whole Pearl Harbor experience, I would recommend going to Pearl Harbor, to the Arizona Memorial, to the Battleship Missouri, and to the Pacific Aviation Museum. You could also go to the USS Belfin, which is a submarine there. It's not as interesting as all the other stuff.
Good to know. It's a little tourist tip for you.
Last bit of spy fact versus spy fiction. So during the filming of this movie, one of the Corsairs, which was mocked up to look like a Japanese bomber, actually clipped a coconut tree and crashed. I remember seeing this in the news at the time. The pilot was injured, but it survived. It was a minor injury. But ironically enough, it's very similar to what happened in an accident while they were filming Tora Tora Tora. Another plane, which was mocking up a Japanese fighter, also crashed, but that time the pilot actually died.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I didn't hear about that.
But it was interesting that, it was both films, which were filmed both in Hawaii and were both, depicting Pearl Harbor, or the attack on Pearl Harbor, had similar accidents where planes misfired and clipped something and crashed. Living in Hawaii at the time when I was filming, I remember that vividly, seeing in the news. All right, so shall we get to our favorite quotes? I've got a bunch, but if other people want to go first, be my guest.
Sarah, as our guest, would you like to go first?
Sure, I would love to. I wrote down 2, but in retrospect, So I wrote down I think World War II just started. That legitimately gave me a chuckle when it came up in the movie. Zach, if I could guess, I don't know. We definitely haven't talked about it on this particular pod. I have a spidey sense that you are not in favor of that World War I just happened. Like announcing the thing that like legitimately just happened. Like, I think we just entered a great war. I have a sense that you're not a huge fan.
It's funny you say that because we talked about this quote on the podcast before in the movie Bridge of Spies. We talked about how someone uses the term Cold War.
Yes, that's what it was.
That's right.
Right. Yes. Somebody was very against it. I thought it was Zach because I remember I listened to that episode.
I think it was both of us because this discounts all the fighting that was going on in Europe already.
Right. The one thing I remember about is I thought Cuba Gooding Jr. said it. Christian thought some red shirt said it. Turned out we were both wrong.
Really? I thought it was
Danny who said it.
I thought I said it was Josh Hartnett. I don't know. I'll have to listen back to the pod.
Okay.
At the time, it gave me a chuckle. Looking at it now, I'm like, that's a stupid line. Why did I write that down? Why did I take effort
to put my favorite quotes too, but it's a pretty dumb line. I think the delivery is what makes it.
Yeah, why did I put pen to paper? But it legitimately gave me a chuckle. My actual favorite, which is corny in a different way, but still wonderful in its corniness, is God help anyone who goes to war with America.
You gotta have the full quote in like a British accent. I'd just like to say, if there's any more like you back home, God help anyone who goes to war with America.
Yeah, history buffs really didn't like that quote, but I say, where's the lie?
All right, well, that's 2 off my list then. Zach, what do you got?
Wait, those are both on your list?
Oh, yeah.
I did like World War II just started. I liked, Michael Shannon says, ladies cloud the mind. Because that's very him, and it's very the times. I liked someone said, you died, and so did I.
That was Evelyn, I think, yeah.
But then the last favorite line I will say is, let's go do some business.
Who says that?
Somebody says it when they're like going to go fight some Japanese, and I thought it was cool.
Okay. Sarah's got 2 off my list. From the Japanese admiral who says, a brilliant man would find a way not to fight a war. Photographer saying, I'm with Navy Newsreel. I can tell you one thing. Them ain't Navy planes. From FDR, I like sub-commanders. They have no time for bullshit, and neither do I.
No time for baloney, and neither do I.
Actually, I think the caption should say bull ...
Yeah, it says that sometimes too.
Let's see, from Alec Guinness. There's only one more thing I can tell you. Leave your goddamn hula shirts at home.
Yeah, that Alec Guinness, he really knows what he's talking about.
I did leave the hula shirt.
Yeah. And this is an actually good line I like from Dan Aykroyd's character. I understand my job is to gather and interpret material, making difficult decisions based on incomplete information from my limited decoding ability is your job, sir.
Put him in his place.
And lastly, one of Danny's last words is to take a shot at Rafe. He says, can you do me a favor, Rafe? Can you have someone else write my name on the tombstone? Because he's
that was
dyslexic.
A little mean.
I was like, whoa!
In the moment, because of the delivery, I interpreted it as, I don't want you to have like the burden and the responsibility. Like, I didn't think it was funny. I thought it was straight. I thought in the moment, of course, now I'm like, Danny, you do that.
That's your last words, Danny. You're taking a shot at your friend.
Yeah, in the moment, because I was so wrapped up in the bromance, I was like, you don't want your best friend to have the burden of like writing your name on the tombstone. And like, but no, it says he can't spell. Like, that's mean.
Wow. Yeah.
It was not a very well-timed joke. I will agree with that. All right, so now it is time for our ratings on a scale of 1 to 10 martinis. 1 being The Avengers 1997, still the worst movie we've covered, and 10 being some hypothetically really good movie, better than Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. How would we rate Pearl Harbor? Sarah, as our guest, you may go first if you'd like.
Sure. So I would say 6 out of 10 martinis.
All right. Want to give any explanation for that?
My feelings oscillated a great deal during the 3 hours of this cinematic event. But bottom line at the end is that it was It was an enjoyable watch. I believe, I don't know if you're still doing this, but of all the pods I've listened to recently, you've been rating it as how good is it as a spy movie?
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, so I sort of had a little bit of a running tally in my head, in addition to which team am I on? Hashtag Team Guinea or hashtag Team.
Right.
I thought, so the beginning, I don't know, first like third-ish, I was like, this isn't a spy movie at all. This gets a 0. This gets no martinis. This is not a spy movie, regardless of its entertainment value. But there was some sprinkling in of stuff, and there was more of that sort of infused throughout the movie. So like arguably more spy stuff than Sergeant Stubby.
That's fair to say, yeah.
I mean, and I have other feelings about Austin Powers. Those are the 2 movies I've been on for. Overall, entertaining to watch. It got me in the feels, both in terms of like my upsettedness as a woman and also my sentimental feelings, both in terms of like friends wishing each other goodbye before they go off to war, and the exciting patriotism that you get from like watching a Jack Bauer go like find a bomb. So all in all, it was a roller coaster of a ride. Figure it kind of evens out to in the middle-ish.
But on the better side of in the middle.
I think it's because it more or less ended on a note of me not completely hating it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, admittedly, I didn't love some of the choices at the end there. If it had ended at a different point, when I had just coming off of a fume of, you shouldn't treat women that way, you should respect their boundaries. If that was how I'd been feeling, then I probably would have rated it slightly the lower side of the middle. But at the time, I was, despite the fact that thinking about it now, like it did kind of end on an anti-feminist note a little bit. Winding back the clock, like 10 minutes, there was enough of a high, although it really did kind of have 2 endings.
All right, Zach, you want to go next?
Sure. So I went into this movie expecting it to be terrible because its reputation preceded it by a long shot. People always talk about how bad it is. There's a whole song in Team America World Police about how much it sucks.
Yeah.
It is really long, and it doesn't need to be that long. The acting's pretty bad, not that I'm really someone who cares so much about acting. If it had ended, I think...
After Pearl
Harbor, and they didn't include the Doolittle raid stuff, and if it had been titled something other than Pearl Harbor... I think it would have been seen as like not great, maybe a little pretentious, but ultimately pretty forgettable. I didn't like it as much as Sarah, and I'm sure not as much as Christian, but it definitely is not, well, it's not a terrible movie. There's things to like, and even the love story wasn't that painful to sit through, so I will give it 4 out of 10 martinis.
Alrighty.
I didn't know, admittedly, like anything about the movie, even the fact that it was bad. What I knew about it was it's not really about the attack, it's about a love story. And knowing that now, whose love story? They think who's the love story? Is it Ben Affleck and Evelyn? Like, is that the love story?
No, it's
like,
Danny and Rafe.
Ah, there you go.
It's the romance love story.
Way more with me, and I would have liked it probably better if it were more that than the love triangle that I have feelings about. But yeah, calling it a love story, it seems, I don't know, it's not that it's unaware of its bromance, but there's a lot of overtones of romance.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to point out, by the way, and I should have mentioned this during my recap, was doing some research about why people didn't like it. I think people felt like it was disrespectful to the veterans who died at Pearl Harbor by making a Pearl Harbor movie that's about some fictional romance, plus all the inaccuracies made it feel kind of sloppy. I am not sure how much I agree with that criticism. I think people just wanted to hate it, and it became a self-perpetuating cycle.
So it's interesting about the 2 endings. It definitely, like, it ended. Like, the movie ended. And then there was, like, a 30-minute epilogue or whatever it was. And I have mixed feelings about having the little raid at all. I like that it made me look up what happened with the Doolittle raid. Because I was like, I need to know if this happened. Like, I just gotta know. And I enjoyed watching that part of it here, like from oh, that's a neat concept. I want to hear more about the Doolittle Raid, but like from a storytelling perspective, I think like the movie was complete, and I would have been very happy with a second movie separately about the Doolittle Raid. So
there are movies about the Doolittle Raid.
Yeah.
Right. Something that jumps to mind that I think would have improved, because what happened in the Doolittle Raid was Danny needed to die. So it would have been much cleaner to have him die at Pearl Harbor and then have the ending of the movie be Rafe getting onto the Doolittle Raid and having them launch, and then have some text about what happened with the Doolittle Raid.
Which is what I thought that's how it was going to end. And it wasn't until at the end when the title screen came up, Michael Bay, and I wrote, oh, that's why this movie kept going.
Right.
Or actually, it's Michael Bay and then like 8 question marks. Oh, that explains the long war sequence.
Explains so much.
Oh, that's great. All right, so time for my review. Now, admittedly, and I think I've said this at the top, that I do love this film. And I mentioned that I saw this twice in theaters. How much of this is because it's set in a place that I've lived and I recognize some of the scenery and all that is up for debate. But also, it hits me in that sweet spot of, all right, Top Gun, pilots, great. And then World War II, woo, I love that stuff too. It gets me in all those 3 spots. And if I was just rating this as a movie, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, maybe, I don't know. But really high up there. As an intelligence movie or a spy movie, most of the spying is down to Dan Aykroyd's character. But even though he's an amalgamation of a bunch of actual characters who we saw last week in Tora Tora Tora, he had more personality than any of them. And I was more invested in his story and than the actual real life characters in Tora Tora Tora. That's kind of horrible to say, but I was more invested in the story because I actually had a feel for his character. He wasn't just a guy who would show up a few times on screen, say something that he said historically, and then disappear, never to be seen again. So for that, I'm going to rate this movie higher than I did Tora Tora Tora. I'm waffling between 6.5 and 7. I'm going to say 6.5 because I did enjoy this movie more than I did Tora Tora Tora.
I will confess, I did rate mine in terms of like, I know I said I'm aware that I'm rating it as a spy movie, and then I didn't.
That's
and then
fine.
I just straight up didn't.
Yeah, it's your rating. You can do whatever you want.
But 6.5. I love this movie, and I will probably watch it again in the near future because I enjoy it. And how much of that is due to me seeing this, as a kid and relating to Danny and then being gutted when he died? I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm the kid who invented stuff out of other stuff. I was also more shy, less sure of himself and that sort of stuff. So related to Danny, and then seeing Danny gets the girl, and then no, he's dead. What? I had feelings. I had feelings about that. 6.5 out of 10. I do enjoy this movie as an intelligence movie. I liked the depiction of it, and that quote from Dan Aykroyd about having to make those calls and all that stuff was great for me.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Sarah. Is there anything you would like to plug?
Of course. So if you're interested in following me on my journeys around Hawaii, I have a YouTube channel, and I'm having a lot of fun vlogging. So if you'd like to experience Hawaii with me, you can join me at Sarah Is Actually on YouTube.
And you may see some surprise appearances from previous guests of the podcast and also myself.
It's true.
Thank you for joining us. As always, you can find us on social media at the Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time, I'm Christian.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.